Good evening, everybody. Welcome to episode 38 of the Political Pigpen. Tonight, we will be discussing the recent Supreme Court decisions. In addition, well, specifically affirmative action. That's the one that is going to cover the majority of this stream. At that, I'd say it's about time to get started. I just want to make one last note. I recently set up a subscribe star, which I shared on my Twitter account. If anybody is interested in contributing or helping me out, that would be greatly appreciated. I'll also be taking comments that anybody would like to post on there. You don't have to, of course. You know how it goes for those of you who've been watching streams such as this for a while. But again, let's just go ahead and get started. Go around the panel for some introductions. First up, we have Yiz the Eunuch. How are you doing this evening, Yiz? Do you want to go ahead and...
I'm doing well, thank you.
Want to go ahead and introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit what you're about and kind of content you make, and what brings you here this evening, other than the fact that I invited you.
Well, I am not very familiar with the Political Pigpen, unfortunately. I'm familiar with you and your short form content, but not your streams. I'm a white well-being advocate. I've had a YouTube channel for quite some time. I am not of any particular political persuasion. I just want the evil to end. And I've been covering all kinds of, I guess you could call it truther stuff for quite some time. Things like voter fraud, 9/11 truth, that kind of thing. And in the recent era, I've been battling anti-whiteism and pointing out the horrible things being done to us, not just as Americans, but as the white race. Things are being done to us that are untoward, and we have a sickness in us called anti-whiteism. And I seek to cure that in my lifetime. So that's who I am, and that's what I'm about.
All right, thank you, Yiz. Now, a guest we haven't had in a while, Liberal Sanity Project. How have you been doing lately? It's been a while.
I was in retirement, but I'm happy to be out.
No longer making videos or anything?
We'll see. I'm trying. It's a day-by-day thing.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I kind of hit a weird moment in my life. Hi, I'm Liberal Sanity Project, or LSP, or the artist formerly known as LSP, or A27L, or any various number of weird names that don't have any real meaning. I'm a history teacher. I graduated with a degree in political science, and I like to discuss YouTube and politics on the internet.
All right, thank you for coming this evening, LSP. And now another person we haven't had in a while, the artist formerly known as Cringe Walker, or Kringvolker, as I used to call him, or Luth Templar now. How are you doing this evening?
El Templar. El Templar, yeah. It's
El Templar.
I'm good. I'm mostly into theology and history, and I really like exploring current things through the lenses of history, and especially things that are maybe not as well known in history. Recent Substack called The Oath of Mars explored the foundation of France from the Roman Empire and how that has a lot of similarities with what's going on in America now. I guess I've recently made a stir with a lot of my art, and I always appreciate. I saw people stealing my Mike Pence image I made that got pretty popular. So there's like 5 or 6 different shirts being sold that I didn't authorize. Such is the life of an internet artist. You just get stolen all the time.
Well, that's the way it is, I guess. Hopefully
it do be like that.
Yeah. Well, anyway, at that, let's get started. Again, the topic of the evening, we are going to be discussing the recent Supreme Court decisions, specifically the student debt relief, the one having to do with, I forget what the exact one is called, but they're the one with the Colorado, I think it was like a wedding album shop. It was like the right to refuse LGBT customers. And then the big one is going to be affirmative action. So that is going to cover the majority of the episode. Oh, and at that, we have the infamous Ray Murasami showing up. How are you doing this evening, Ray? Oh, well, she's probably getting everything sorted out. But yeah, no, so those are going to be the topics of discussion. I was thinking we'd probably go ahead, just start with the student debt relief one. That's, I guess, one of the more contentious ones, but I also personally find it to be the least interesting. But hopefully you guys will have something to say about it. So at that, give me a moment. In the meantime, Ray, how are you doing this evening?
Pretty well overall.
Do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Looks like I kind of made it just in time. Or did you actually all wait until I arrived?
No. We didn't give you that courtesy.
It just so happens to have lined up that way. Okay. Introduction, right? How are we
Yeah.
still at introductions then?
Well, because you just so happened to arrive shortly after we started. So again, coincidence, but
Okay. The gods have decided that... Okay, that's good. Okay, so apparently, according to my description, I'm a cultural commentator and a political analyst from the perspective of socialist third worldism tendency. I'm an advocate of post-colonial feminism and Pan-Asianism. I have a live stream channel that I operate on YouTube. It hasn't actually had much content for a while, given that 2020 has been a thing. Since 2020 to 2023, it's been like an adjustment to the new normal. But I've always been willing to talk to people from all sides of the political spectrum. I'm also a systems analyst working in the defense sector, and I have an interest in sustainable diversification of natural gas supply in Europe and Asia. That's the description on my YouTube channel, so I'm just giving that, I suppose. It kind of covers everything.
okay. So yeah, no. So I figured it might be interesting. Like, I know you're on the left. However, I have this sneaking suspicion that you are going to agree quite a bit with Yiz on the affirmative action bit. So I just want to see where that goes. Again, everybody, it's all cordial here. Even though we might have disagreements on certain things, let's keep it civil. I know we usually haven't had much of a problem with that in a while. Ever since Harrogate. You remember Harrogate, right, Ray?
Oh, you mean when you all had this massive fight?
Oh yeah, which is
Yeah.
which does not happen anymore on this show. But either way, so we are going to get started by discussing the student loan forgiveness plan that Joe Biden.
Before we get started, I would just like to remind everyone, you painted me as I'm some kind of opposite to Ray. I'm neither left wing nor right wing. I do not have a political persuasion.
Oh, I know. I'm aware.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, for the record, I don't know anyone's political position, what anyone's political position on the topic you've mentioned is going to be, even though, of course, I've spoken to LSP extensively before. I've not been able to guess what his position on this might be either. So,
in my opinion,
I'm
I
going to be
don't
surprised by everyone.
In my opinion, I don't have extreme views one way or the other.
No, I don't think you do
I
either,
think we'll be just fine.
Specifically, yeah, I agree. Okay, so we're just going to take a look over this article first. So, 2 big takeaways from the Supreme Court ruling on Biden's student loan forgiveness plan. So, of course, we know conservative Supreme Court justices found that his plan would hurt Missouri's bottom line, that the president didn't have the power to cancel so much student debt. Kagan disagreed. Majority overrides combined judgment. So, Supreme Court struck down Biden administration's student loan forgiveness plan at the end of June, dealing crushing blow to the president as he runs for re-election. Tens of millions of Americans who were promised financial relief. Unsurprisingly, the 6-3 vote was split on ideological lines. No surprise there. But what else did the justices have to say? How did they reach their conclusion? So again, conservative justices, they were the ones who decided this. The biggest obstacle was showing that they'd been harmed by the relief policy, typically a requirement to gain the right to sue. The need to provide the so-called legal standing designed to prevent people from using the judicial system. A lot of this stuff is just boring technical stuff. I think all we really need to know about this. Joe Biden wanted to cancel student debt. That's been kind of a controversy over the past, about the past 5 years or so. But the conservative Supreme Court struck it down, which has pissed a lot of people off. What are your guys' thoughts on this? I guess going around in a circle, starting with Yiz. And if you don't have a position on it, that's fine.
Well, I don't have a strong position. It's just I like local government having precedence over certain things, most things. So I'm okay with it being states' rights. I've always been a states' rights person anyway, so I'm fine with it.
Okay. What about you, Lieutenant Templar?
One has to wonder if Biden didn't know this was going to happen, and if this is just an attempt to woe is me, we've seen Biden force through things when he really wants it, and then he will just accept a judgment when it's something this is a typical playbook of looking like the victim of woe is me, the conservative court struck me down. So I'm wondering if this is just an attempt to gauge voters because make themselves look like victims, and then hate conservatives, right? I've seen this happen a little bit. I've been through the university system in multiple ways. I've played race cards when I went to get further because of my heritage when I need to, and I'm not afraid to do it. Like I'll play the cards to get what I want, and it's not like these incompetent buffoons look at my heritage anyway. So who cares? You can just make up whatever you want.
Well, we're not talking about we're not talking about affirmative action. We're talking about the student debt.
Oh, that's student debt. Yeah, it's the same thing.
Yes.
Even with student debt, a lot of times it is racial quotas with who they offer loans to and what kind of loans they offer. I think my statement still holds true. Like trying to get the student voter, just like woe is me, I can't get rid of your debt. Vote for me, I promise I'll do it for reals, and they never do. At the end of the day, they make more money with the debt than without, and at the end of the day, they're gonna push for those interest rates to get more money. It's just the way it works.
So are you suggesting that it might have actually just been theater, like they were expecting that it was going to get overturned purchasing? And then we also need to remember at the same time, Biden isn't nearly as liberal as like his handlers are trying to make him out to be. I mean, I'm not saying he's definitely not a right winger, but like I wouldn't even call him a centrist either. He's just a Democrat. He's just going to do whatever the party tells him to do. He's not particularly ideological.
Doubt,
but Mr. Anti-busing Biden. But okay, yeah. What about you?
No
LSP?
comment.
Yeah.
You say, what about me?
Yeah. What about you? Thoughts on the student debt cancellation? The Supreme Court overturning that.
I'm totally in favor of student debt cancellation. I'm a little disappointed with the Supreme Court's ruling, although I understand. Like, I feel like their primary issue wasn't that Biden canceled student debt. Like, I think their issue was just attaching it to a certain law that basically said this is an emergency situation. Here's what you can deal with. That said, like, I only see like generally positives out of what Biden outlined. So Biden outlined student debt cancellation for a group of Americans who earn between $0 and like $100,000 a year, and that's only those who receive Pell Grants, which I was one. It was actually like a big deal to help me get through college, just getting a Pell Grant. And then there's also Stafford loans. So canceling this debt means that you have the highest achieving Americans starting off without like losing upfront capital to start businesses, to start jobs, to start investing, to start building up their own little personal empire of capital. Like it's a good thing. Like the whole point of education is to further these people's ability to contribute into the overall economy, and it's a little harder to do that if they are hampered down by debt. Clearly, like if you're wealthier, this isn't such an issue, but if you're not, right, it's I think like 90% of the savings of this went to people earning less than $75,000 a year. That's a big deal. And I'm speaking as somebody who earns less than $75,000 a year. Having a little bit of extra cash to spend every month could go a long way in growing my retirement, could grow a long way in providing startup capital if I ever wanted to open a business, stuff like that. There's only opportunity for student debt forgiveness. And it's only an economic sink when that money is taken out of the economy, which it is when you have to pay it back to the government. That's my position.
And then we also need to remember that a lot of the, and I guess this is like the big, I guess, libertarian take when it comes to the source of student debt. A lot of it was because a lot of these grants being given out by the government have not only inflated the number of people who are going to college, thus incentivizing the creation of, I don't want to call them useless majors. I want to find a nicer way to say it, but for the lack of a better, of a less mean way of saying it, unnecessary majors, and that has also ended up exasperating it basically made the return on investment not
what
worth it
specifically.
Let's gender let's go with the classic gender studies, dance.
Real quick, have you ever met a gender studies major, like unironically?
I've met 3 gender minors before, but that was because the school ended up canceling it as a major because it wasn't doing well.
I hear this talking point a lot. The top 10 college majors people get in is computer science, communications, government and poli-sci, business, econ, English and literature. So ELA and literature, psychology, nursing, chemical engineering, and biology.
Okay. So I would actually argue, and I say this as somebody who double major in political science and English, minor in economics. Alone, a lot of those degrees don't really do much. However, when you combine them, if you double major, major, minor, major, double minor, whatever, that is really when it comes into use. However, when you only major in one, it's less useful unless it's something in STEM.
You could say that about any major, but I wouldn't say any of these majors here, any of these majors, people, the top 10 are useless majors. I think all of these are pretty important, especially computer science being the top one. Like
computer science is important. That's one of the most important ones. But
yeah, it seems like with the top 10 here, it doesn't seem like government's incentivizing useless majors. It seems like it's the opposite. It's incentivizing very useful majors, actually.
Either way, we're getting into the weeds.
Oh, I'm sorry. You know, I like to jump the gun.
Yeah, I know. But either way, so I mean, in terms of my position on the overall issue, so again, I say this, I come from an economic libertarian perspective. I know I'm basically supposed to be against this, but in reality, I'm not as well versed on this particular subject in order for me to be honest, like make an honest answer as to whether I agree with it or disagree with it. I totally sympathize with those who are struggling with this, who are struggling paying back their student debt. But on the other hand, debt isn't just something you could like cancel, wave away with a magic wand. It's much more difficult than I feel like a lot of people, especially you see like left tubers, I don't know, like Kyle Kalinske saying like,
yeah, if you let me step in for a second, that's where I'm at on this too, because like you, I come from a more lower right libertarian, economic freedom type of I guess you could call it upbringing. But when you just look at what is that debt, like you said, is very real and not going away. So I don't really think it matters if it's a state or a federal issue. It's just like reparations, right? People talk about, I want reparations for this and that all the time. The fact of the matter is that's just a ridiculously huge economic impossibility that I don't think will happen. I don't think we're going to see reparations for anyone, and I don't think we're going to see any college debt forgiven. I just don't think we're going to see that, because economic enslavement to the system is how the system thrives and keeps the plebs in line. I just don't think we're going to see that absolved and wiped away, even though we know they just magically create all the money they want anyway.
Yeah, I'd say that like you could flip a switch and make it go away, but the financial incentive to do so isn't there. And at the end of the day, people are going to be financially motivated. You have to remember that a lot of times the quantity of debt counted gets used as I forget how it works exactly, but like if a bank owes $1 billion, they can like trade $100 million of that in loans upon loans. Like you can like use the collateral of the loan payment as further loans built on top of loans, and then you have a financial disaster brewing. The loss of the loss of liquidity of a lot of banks has made them a little hazardous about this matter. This is also why I think interest rates are going up, because people are trying to pay back loans that they use as collateral for loans And if you paid back, if you evaporate some of those loans, you're also evaporating the like 10% collateral that you're allowed to count for lending out other money. So like the banks would be losing the collateral they can count, basically. I'm probably confusing some terms here. I'm not an economic person, but that's what I've been like kind of read between the lines about it. Where like if Biden evaporates $1 billion, that's also evaporating $100 million of like collateral that banks can use. And so that has downstream consequences of not being able to like offer people loans for their small businesses and for other investments that the banks use. They assume they're going to get a certain amount of money back from loans off of interest, so they use it as collateral to offer other loans to other people once they're out. This is also how you create a side note. This is how you create a lifetime debt enslavement, where like you get the loans for the young, they're indebted, then you can use the collateral of that money coming in for loans for the newly graduated, and then you can use the debt from that as a collateral for the middle-aged people, and you can just pop like collateral on top of collateral. So if any one of those bricks gets removed, it downstream removes collateral all the way down, and you end up having like an economic recession.
Fair enough. Ray, I know you're not American here, and I don't know if you really feel like you're in a place to discuss this, whether due to, again, you're not being
I'm definitely
familiar
in a
with this.
place to discuss this.
Okay.
And so, I mean, in my view, LSP is correct. I mean, obviously. And
Obviously, I like that, Ray. Let's go.
It's one of those things where, like, we disagree on some things, but on like stuff that's like just basic, like how do you live in this world, we're in like agreement. And so I've got here my notes already. LSP's point is true, and I would even add in addition that people shouldn't even have been paying this in the first place, because if the whole point of education is that it should be sort of a meritocratic function, that you basically rise and fall on your willingness and ability to do the work, not on being part of the sort of financial aristocracy, right? Then people should be rewarded for the work that they've put in. People shouldn't be going to school and then coming out the other end being in debt when they haven't even done anything yet, right? It seems completely ridiculous. Why are state systems not essentially subsidizing this entire thing? This is a question. I mean, if you look at the article that's displayed on screen there as well, you'll see that ironically, the state is arguing that it somehow is implicated in this debt forgiveness business because it would be in some way harmed. I mean, I also disagree. So I would actually be in agreement with, I guess, Kagan on her rebuttal here, which is that, if they really do
I just
want to
try to
connected to this, it would be interesting if they would be willing to pay instead then.
I just want to say I want to try to speed run through this particular one because we still have the gay one, just the gay one, and then we have the affirmative action piece, which is going to cover the majority of the stream.
Well, then I'll be really quick then. I mean, just in terms of cutting the strings, I think people were referring to it in that way. In terms of cutting it, in order to get from one system to another, there was never going to be a way to make that transition in a way where lenders were going to feel comfortable about it. When they go into this business, which they already knew was a dirty business in the first place, they should expect that at some point they may take a loss. I mean, the amount of interest they're also charging as well seems that they've already covered for potential losses of having these sort of debtors ripped away from them and taken to a place of safety, right? They've already made their money through the interest anyway. What are they complaining about? And so, I mean, this is one of those things where I have no sympathy whatsoever for the for the lenders in this case. It's one of those things where, they've already got their money through interest. They're already treating these customers as though they're extremely high-risk individuals. Why not give them a little bit of risk then? Why not let Joe Biden get his way on this?
Well, yeah, so we ended up, I don't know if you're here for this, but we ended up coming to the conclusion we don't actually think that Joe Biden was for this and he expected it to fail and it was mostly just for political clout. You might disagree with that, but just
I can address that too because that was in my notes too.
Well, I want to be able to,
even if it was Biden's,
I want to be able, Ray, I want to be able to speed run through this because we still have a lot to get to. I just want to give Damnation just a few seconds just to explain, just to say his piece on this particular issue, so we can then move on to another one. Yeah,
just to make sure I'm on point with this. We're talking about the Supreme Court decision striking down the Biden student loan forgiveness thing, right?
Yes, correct.
Cool. All right. So while I agree with a good chunk of what they said after the loans are given, right, we have to jump back to this idea that at the end of it, the person that is going to college is the one making the choice to go to college and incur that debt, right? So there are other, while it's a quick, fast, and dirty way to get ahead on life, there are other opportunities that you could potentially look at that, and Mike Rowe, the guy who does Dirty Jobs, outlines a massive shit ton of jobs that you can do that you can just survive and have a good family life with that. You just got to bust your ass on that point. You can choose not to go to college. With that, once you make that choice to go to college, you incur all of the risk as an individual, as well as all of the benefits of that, which means you have to pay back the money at the end of it.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. So
shouldn't the lenders also incur risk? I mean, they're lending to
They already are.
Yeah, they're lending to children. So I mean, if you're lending money to children, and then Joe Biden comes along and ruins your game, you deserve what you get, almost, in my view.
The thing that lenders can do, the only thing that lenders can do when they're talking about mitigating risk is by like screwing with fees and being harsher on credit, on like credits and things like the credit checks to allow people to have it and whatnot, and the interest rates. So that's why those things have such a high interest rate, because they might not necessarily get all of the payments back, but with those payments that they do get, they're already making money off the interest on that. So like that's kind of already calculated baked into the loan.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. So this is why I was saying earlier that what are they so upset about? They've already collected so much money in interest from having abused people for so long, and now they're acting like they're the victim.
That's stupid. I agree with you on that, Ray. That it is stupid that I would tell any of the lenders, well, we need to be. I'm like, no, shut up. You already got your fucking money. On the
Exactly.
interest rate, shut up.
And so it had to stop somewhere, right? And
Yeah,
so I'm anticipating that if they're going through all of this, the idea is to I guess move the system away from this lending system into a more subsidized one or something, where student fees are capped in some way. And so if they're going to do that, at some point, if they're going to make that change from one system to the other, at some point the lenders would have to be told to get off this train. It's just a matter of when it's going to happen then. Apparently it's not this time, but maybe next time.
I don't have an issue with the lending system existing in and of itself, right? That's not my main problem with it. My main problem is when everybody says, well, you have to go to college. It's like, no, you don't. You make a choice to go to college. And because of that, all of the things that happen along with that chain are what happens. And you as the individual are responsible for it.
I question the claim that people choose because most people do sleepwalk into college, not realizing what they're doing. And then when they get wiser and older, they kind of realize, oh crap, I've just become a debt slave.
Yeah,
Maybe rich people do this. Oh well, I'm a debt slave.
The point that Damnation is making is still correct though, because even if Lutemplar is correct, and most of these people that incur this debt were just walked into it, well, why should the foxes be taxed to reward the sheep? I just don't think that's accurate. That's just an unhealthy way to be. Like, you shouldn't steal from the successful and the cunning to subsidize the weak and the stupid, because then you just get more weak and stupid and less smart and less cunning and productive.
Well, would you be fine with college debt forgiveness if it was just for the graduates?
No, of course not.
No.
Okay, so it doesn't have anything to do with weak and stupid. You just don't want, like, to you, it's just if you're rich, it's fine, and if you have to have your
it has
education
nothing to do with being
subsidized.
rich. It has nothing to do with being rich.
That's not at all what I said. That has nothing to do with.
You're
what I
asking
said.
why people have to subsidize the education of the weak and the stupid.
Hey guys,
And the weak
on
and the
that-
stupid
Anyway,
here
yeah,
would be-
yeah. We're
Do you guys wait? On
this is
that
all-
note, I think it's time that we move on to the next one. This could be maybe a
Damn.
stream of its own at some
Well,
point.
just one thing, just 30 seconds. I just
Okay,
want
okay,
30 seconds on this.
30 seconds.
Just
right.
one thing on this weak and stupid point, etc., etc. It's kind of a wraparound then, because I also find that people have this conversation on, it would be unfair for the state to do such and such. Well, who is currently in control of the state? So, like, why is it the case that basically foxes get to control Missouri or whichever state it was to tell Missouri that they need to bring a suit to make sure that things remain in a kind of unbalanced position? But like, if sheep get wise and become foxes and try to pass legislation to prevent foxes from controlling Missouri's state, then suddenly they're wrong. You see what I mean? So it's
no.
That's like state versus states. There's no situation here where the state was not involved. It's basically, will the state act on behalf of those who are disadvantaged, or will the state act on behalf of those who are already controlling the state?
I wanted to just pop in because I have my little network of I'm like Saruman and have a network of listening ears that inform me of things. My crows have told me that there is something called the asset-backed commercial paper, in which essentially if these student loans were forgiven, it would obliterate a large sum of pension funds for people. I mean, fuck boomers.
So these are kind of set up. These are kind of set up of like
they're pyramid schemes of sorts.
Well, it's not a pyramid
scheme.
No,
that's not the right term.
When you say asset-backed thing, right? What that basically means is you have the mortgage-backed securities that existed in the housing crisis of 2008, right? So
yeah,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, this is very similar to, I think, the housing crisis, whereas that was like real estate based. This is more debt based.
Yeah,
same thing basically. But these connivers are always looking for a new market to get money off of.
Fucking banks are shysters, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just to be clear, then, does this mean that in America, the older generation of people, i.e., the quote-unquote boomers, are actually making money off of their own children's impoverishment? Is that what's actually occurring?
Yes.
To some degree,
yes. That's correct.
That's correct.
It's the boomers want every nickel, dime, and penny that they can get.
Our system is so corrupt and backwards it can't last.
Yeah. So I think we can all agree that it's a fucked up system. And
it certainly is.
Yes, it shouldn't have been created like this in the first place. That's my position.
And
I agree with you on that, Politicrat.
It's worth mentioning, like the way this isn't like I want to compare that just briefly. I want to compare this to like a pharmaceutical company will make a drug that fixes one problem but creates 5 other ones, because this is an entangled mess, essentially. This is a bomb which will eventually go off and make everyone impoverished, and we will have a Great Depression. It's just the question of it's the question of who's going to pay the bill, and the boomers don't want to. And once their retirement funds go down, they don't want to die in poverty. Anyway, it's just worth realizing that the entire system is set up that they're making money off of the.
It's a gigantic game of hot potato, and hope to God you're not the one that catches it.
Well said. That's a good metaphor. Yeah,
that's what it seems like they've done.
And the money explodes instead of it's the money that explodes in your face.
It's the whole entire U.S. economy that explodes, not the fucking potato. Yeah.
And I will
the regulators, when this was designed, you think the regulators would have looked at this and begun screaming immediately, right?
Yeah. My friend says ABCP is a bank debt collateralized with student loans and credit card debt. So you can't just get rid of one of the debt. You kind of have to get rid of all of the debt, and then
now we're talking. I'm completely.
Now we're talking. Let's just make the whole
get rid of all the debt. Yeah. Tyler Durden.
And this is a good example. Like if different generations of people like mutually agreed we're going to get rid of this debt, and we're all going to take a little bit of the bill, it could work out. But that's like an ideal world. In practical terms, it means that like this is a system that eats itself. The next generation that gets old and wants their retirement fund is going to enslave the next generation that's younger than them for the next generation. This will go on
like Social Security, basically.
Yeah, I personally, I'm not planning on retiring because I don't think I'll ever see any money they stole from me for retirement.
No, we won't. None of us will.
I'm not planning
on
it. That's my little 2 cents. I just want to end on that little.
So on that note, can we all just agree that this is a fucked up system? I think.
Yeah, okay. Of course we do. Yeah.
All right, that's good. That's good. I'm glad we're all in agreement on that. So now moving on to the next one. Supreme Court says First Amendment entitles web designer to refuse same-sex wedding work. I feel like this is basically just a repeat of the wedding cake thing that happened a few years back.
Yep,
it really is. It really is. So major decision.
It's a good decision. I agree with it because
well, hold on. We'll take a look at the article. But so in a major decision affecting LGBTQ rights, that's not really the case. But the U.S. Supreme Court on Friday carved out a significant exception to public accommodation laws that most states don't bar discrimination based on sexual orientation. 6-3 vote. I think this is going to be a common trend in this episode. Court sided with Lori Smith, Colorado web designer who opposed same-sex marriage, challenges the state's public accommodations law, claiming that by requiring her to serve everyone equally, the state was unconstitutionally enlisting her in creating a message she opposes. So now I'm going to start out by commenting on this, and I'm going to say this has been mischaracterized by a lot of the people, especially, I don't want to really boil it down to a whole left-right thing, but for the lack of being, for the lack of a better colloquial and also for time. I'm going to say this is either being mischaracterized by those people or completely misunderstood. For instance, I've seen Twitter takes that have said, of course, that's my first problem being on Twitter, but I've seen Twitter takes saying, oh, this is leading us into a theocracy. We're not supposed to establish religion. I'm like, okay, first of all, this has nothing to do with the establishment of religion. If anything, this is the exact opposite of that. Like basically, forcing people to serve LGBTQ people for this, to use their alphabet terminology, to make this.
Just call them the alphabet mafia.
That would be the same thing as essentially like if a religious government forced them to impose religious laws. This is completely neutral. This isn't even a religious freedom issue. This is a free speech issue.
This is a significant exception.
Hold on.
I'm not sure if that's actually the case.
No, hold on. So I just want to say there's functionally no difference between me being a business owner and the government saying, okay, you have to serve these people. There's really no functional difference between that and me going out into the street, yelling the N-word, and then complaining that the government isn't making people be my friend. It's like, okay, I want friends.
Or making other people say the N-word along with you when they don't want to.
It's like, okay, I want.
The compelled speech thing is a bad analogy here. If you're looking for a way to describe this, positive rights and negative rights are different. This represents the striking down of positive right enforcement, which is a good thing if you care about freedom and liberty stuff.
But the wording here doesn't seem to indicate
Okay,
that to me.
so-
It says here significant exception to the public accommodations
Right,
laws. And so tell me if
let
I'm wrong,
LSP
but what I'm reading from this is that the state can force me to bake the cake if it's an Islamist cake, but I cannot be forced to bake the cake if it's an LGBTQ cake. Is that not what that actually means?
I think it just means in the general sense. It can't if it goes against.
But then why does
you
it say
have a religious
carved out
objection.
a significant exception? Why is it being carved out for LGBTQ specifically then? It seems like you can be
I mean,
compelled for everything else, just not
I
that now.
I personally don't think you should be compelled for anything. And my position on this is okay because generally you see how boycotts
So,
work.
can I
mean,
get Politicrat?
Yes.
Your position is completely nonsensical. I'm sorry to say.
How so? How so, LSP?
Yeah, this is clearly about the government respecting a religious establishment, right, or some religiously based establishment, religiously based motivation to discriminate against gay people. I don't know why we're pussyfooting around like this idea that it could mean anything.
It's not discrimination. It's
that's what it reads like to me.
in the way that you mean it.
Somebody refusing to serve somebody at a business is discrimination,
Right? Because that's positive discrimination.
Okay,
everyone discriminates. Right?
Okay.
Everybody discriminates.
Not all discrimination is created equal, right?
You don't
discriminating against gay people for being gay would violate like any notion of equality that we have in society, right? It would be an affront to the very basis of the civil rights movement that we established since the 60s.
Okay. I'm not going to engage with that.
So-
Go ahead.
I mean, he's not wrong, though.
He's-
is he?
he's
If
not
the claim is
wrong,
that
but
everyone
in
can be
this
served equally. Then how can you walk into a store and be like thrown
Because
out?
the idea-
See how they feel
Let
about
them
it?
nation talk.
If gay people are not allowed to go to a store and enjoy its services, it's pretty clear they're being discriminated against.
This
and
is
they're
where
not
the
being treated
distinction
equally.
of this particular decision comes into play, which is the idea of where does my creative freedom to determine what my free speech is versus your right to consume, to buy it from me comes into play. That's why this is very much a free speech issue instead of a acknowledgement of a religion or anything like that. Because just like, if I remember correctly, the bake the cake issue came down to the idea that it would be discriminatory to have to not allow a LGBTQ couple come into your store that you offer cakes to everybody for everybody to purchase, right? And stop them from buying one. But if you wanted to force the cake maker to put a personalized message, which is investing their own artistry into it and a little bit of their own labor to do so, then that goes beyond what you're offering out to the public, and you're talking about a customized version of a thing.
Here's why I don't buy that it's a free speech issue. That artistry is being commodified. That artistry is being put on a market, right? And is being provided as a service in a capitalist enterprise. Gay people pay their taxes too. The police that they pay for protects the businesses that are discriminating against them, right? The roads they pay
That's
for.
a stretch.
No, it's not a stretch at all. Gay people are taxpayers too, right? And businesses enjoy the protection of a public infrastructure created by taxpayer dollars. They should serve the public equally.
So don't solicit
You
that
don't
business.
you don't have a right to you do not as an individual have a right to use me to make a message that I fundamentally disagree with and use my free speech to do it. You don't have a right to do that.
I
That's
want
not
free
free
speech.
speech. That
It
may
is
be
free speech.
It's speech at
That
a
may
cost.
be true.
It's
That may be
speech on a
true,
market.
damnation. But I think that the way this thing is phrased, it's not telling you, or it's not giving web designers in this case the ability to just reject any order they want to reject on the basis of their disagreement with the message. Again, the phrasing here is it creates a specific carve out just for LGBTQ. So you're
Right.
compelled in all other ways, just not that one, which means it's clearly discriminatory then. They should have either done all or nothing. Either you can just pick whatever you want and reject whatever you want, which is fine by me, or you can't pick anything and you have to do all of them.
Yeah,
But they can't set up
Well,
a
this
system
is
where it's
where
like,
we get
okay, you
into-
may reject everything except this, or you may not reject anything, but you can reject that.
Give give El Templar.
I just want to say like I understand the concern, but I have to point out this is why I don't like civil rights law as it's written right now.
That's what I was going to bring up is the concept of.
And it's really the second article. It's the second article of the 1964 Civil Rights Act.
And this is why I would prefer that the civil rights law be removed, not necessarily the there
At
is
least
a
the
reason.
second article.
Yeah.
The notion of it comes from the argument, well, if you're a private hospital, you shouldn't be allowed to like let like a gay person die because you know, and the question fundamentally comes down to what if you read the civil rights law, they're talking about public commodities. This is also why if you're not classified as a public commodity, you're legally entitled to discriminate. You're completely allowed. Civil rights law does not cover all businesses. It only covers hospitality businesses. And this is an important distinction that people often forget. The civil rights law is primarily focused on when it was written, the question of like, what taxpayers might be involved with, such as hospitals and innkeeping. Over time, it was expanded on an undefined amount of private businesses, to the extent that now it became like kind of like, well, why does a cake baker have to do this? A cake baker is in a hospital. Right. This is why the civil rights law has to be reformed to like understand this distinction, which it lacked when it was written. That's my 2 cents.
Okay. So yeah, no, I agree with that, and I think it would be better if instead of for specific instances you expand this to just the right to refuse in general. That's freedom of association. We need to remember the word liberty means freedom from, aka freedom to disassociate. Yep. That's what it is fundamentally about. And there's functionally no different. Like the business or the government shouldn't decide like who is and who isn't able to associate with me as a person. So why should it be the same when it has to do with private businesses? For instance, when going back to LSP's point where he was talking about, oh yes, I'm a taxpayer. Oh yes, I have the police, for instance. I have their protection theoretically, at least. So yeah, theoretically at least.
Yeah.
So what? But and so you're allowed to, as a person, not or choose who you can and who you can't be friends with. But by that logic, then because I'm a taxpayer, I should be able to be friends with everyone. Like, does everyone here agree that the government shouldn't force people to be friends with you?
I, of course, agree with that.
Yeah, exactly.
And again, like the word discriminate has been like weaponized when we make discrimination.
Yeah, that's why I pushed back on it when LSP brought it up, because he meant it as a thing that it wasn't. That's the point I was wanting to make.
In order to make an argument about this, you first have to reclaim the word discrimination from it being an inherent negative. And we could say positive or negative discrimination. Okay, that's a technical term. I just think the word discrimination should be understood as it's not an evil thing. You discriminate all the time when you make friends and who you don't make friends with. You discriminate with who you want to start a business with or who you hire or fire. The question, I think we can all agree, if you're well, like a private hospital, maybe that's a little bit of an exception, but if you're a public hospital, you should probably be expected to like cater to all.
Oh, absolutely.
But then this is why a lot of times one of the other areas where this comes into conflict with is, for example, Catholic hospitals that don't want to do abortions. You're a private institution and you don't want to do that. But like, what if someone has like a fallopian tube baby and they're dying? What are you gonna do?
So LSC came back with some delicious wings. Yeah. Those look good.
Do you have ranch, blue cheese?
Anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Well, I also want to add on that point that I do not believe that, for instance, public, like for instance, if you're looking for a public job, so I guess this more has to do with, I guess, employment discrimination. For instance, if you're going to go to work for a, I don't know, let's say the, I don't know, some government agency or whatever, because it is a public institution that is directly funded by the taxpayers, they shouldn't be able to discriminate you on characteristics such as that, because it is not a private business. However, when it comes to associating with private businesses, just in the same way as it has to do with associating with individuals, which there really is no functional difference, because a business is an extension of yourself as an individual, and especially when you get into creative license here. But,
sorry, technicality. A business is considered a separate legal entity to your person.
Well, yes, okay, I know, but you see where I'm going with this. Though.
Yeah, I want to also bring up one minor thing. This is another fluke of U.S. law. If you have I might be wrong here, but if you have under a certain number of employees, you're not qualified to be like enforced under civil rights law. So like if you're like, I think it's like maybe it's 100 employees, maybe it's 50, I forget. But if you're a small business, you have more liberty to discriminate. The idea is that as you become a larger business and have a greater social impact, you have to have a greater responsibility to the public. I have mixed feelings about that. I feel like you should have a right to have a bigger business, but I think a large amount of this can be negotiated through the tax code rather than the law code. Maybe if you are allowed to, you'll have a greater amount of discrimination if you pay higher taxes. Might make a more sane trade-off. Like, okay, you're free to discriminate as you please, but now you have to pay like higher taxes. May not like that, but at least as the U.S. is structured, that would be a way to do it.
That's essentially the system we have now. You just pay a fine, right?
Yeah. It's a fine in the form of taxes. I'm kind of like, I don't like it, but it makes sense under the U.S. structure that we only have a certain number of classification of businesses. It might be worth expanding that to allow a certain amount of freedom within the law. I get that if you're going to be a big 1,000-employee business, the government's going to expect you to follow its will more, because at the end of the day, a corporation is a unofficial wing of the government.
Yeah, I'd be like, oh, excuse me, IRS, what's the fine for being able to discriminate? Can I pay it in advance?
A corporation isn't going to discriminate to begin with. Like, do you really see a company like Disney?
Right? This ruling could open up that possibility. So let's assume they could. Or let's ask a different question. Like, instead of discriminating against, instead of discriminating,
do you see how successful boycotts are these days?
I'm sure they're very successful.
Take a look at the Target thing.
I don't think that's relevant. It's not relevant because boycotts do not stop, because boycotts are reactive, not preemptive, and we want to prevent discrimination before it happens. So to try to ask a different question, instead of refusing to create a personalized website as a service offered for LGBT people, what if instead this person just refused to hire LGBT people? Would you guys have an issue with that?
I wouldn't have a problem with that if it's a private business. Yeah.
If it's a small company, I would not have.
How come small companies get?
I just don't think it's a very ethical. It's not in their best interest.
I have a pretty good reason on why I agree with small companies and not necessarily larger companies, because when you look at a smaller company, it has overall less impact in regards to like if you look at Walmart, right? When they are in a market or an area, right? They're like the de facto employer for that particular market, right? They tend to not allow as much competition as there could potentially be. A smaller business has less impact on that overall potential market for jobs, which would mean that there is more potentiality for someone who says, I don't want the gays in my business, for another person to open up a similar business. Is I have no issues with employing anybody as long as they can.
I feel like smaller companies have more opportunity to thrive in small places where there aren't Walmarts, right? Where they don't have that competition. So if you get denied a job from a small company in a small town, you're just fucked. Right? What are your options? Move to somewhere else where there's a bigger company that won't discriminate against you?
Yes, you've discovered the beauty of freedom of association. That's how it works.
That's a beauty to you? That's ugly. You've basically you've defended the otherization of a portion of the country.
I have.
You've basically compelled them to move on and go to a different place with their lives and the place they actually want to live.
Yes, you're absolutely correct. I have otherized another population
that are while protecting institutions that
because that's called natural order, son. That's just how things work.
I wouldn't necessarily say
things should work differently then. If that's how things work, things should work differently. Things should be fair.
I don't even necessarily agree with it being natural order. It's an idea that the people who exist in a society get to decide how that society works, right? And if you're in a minority of that and you choose to, and the majority of the people start passing specific laws that say get the fuck out effectively, then you should probably pay attention to get the fuck out.
If a company doesn't want, let's say you're a black guy in a small town, they don't want to hire black people. Mm-hmm. Should a black person just move with his family?
Yes.
Yeah, I tend to agree.
Correct.
Okay, I don't think the United States should be in a position where we create economic refugees out of our own system or out of our own.
We already do.
I think that's.
I just think that's kind of a childish adolescent way to be about it.
I would also say that's
been the method of the United States since the Civil Rights era. I don't think that's childish at all. I think that's actually very proactive in building a better society, a diverse society that doesn't allow the otherization of a portion of its population.
Okay, so I just want to bring up after I speak, I'm going to let Ray say one last thing, and then we're going to move on to the next the next case. But I also want to point out the fact that there are so many websites that you can go to, and that you can, for instance, have like a wedding website or something like that made. We know the people who ultimately filed this suit in the first place were looking for controversy. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. They purposefully went looking for a company that they figured that would discriminate against them and stir up a controversy in the end. I mean, essentially, they are ambulance chasers. I mean, that is fundamentally what the cause of this is about. I mean, you could argue whether or not, like, on principle, you still think that they shouldn't be allowed to discriminate. But either way, this entire case derives from bad faith.
I don't necessarily think that's like the worst thing. Like, yeah, there are lawyer sharks that look for people to sue because they're committing to lawfare. But I mean, you're free to do that if the law is structured in such a terrible way. Again, like at the end of the day, I do think a business and even a community should have the right to form it as it wants. Like the government doesn't have a right to say, you community, we're going to demand you have like an autistically predetermined percentage of certain people groups. Like America is not a equally distributed country. There are some cities that are more black. There are some cities more white. I mean, to flip LSP's perspective over, if you're a small business in Harlem and you want to make a black-owned business, I don't think the government should have a right to force you to hire random Hispanics and whites. Like, you're conducting yourself in a way to create a character of a community.
Yeah, and as long as these, and as long as
something
I
real
just
quick here.
one statement, because it's going to piggyback and then I'll jump out. And yeah, as the system currently exists right now with the existing civil rights laws, there are court cases that are working towards using that to enforce the idea that white people should be able to go into these particularly black spaces. And if you guys want the system this way, then this is what we're going to do. We're going to use it to smack back. So,
and I would go further. Sorry, Liz, you can go first.
I just wanted to say real quick on this topic of discrimination here. People here seem to want freedom. They like liberty, right? I could think we can all agree to that. Well, if you don't have liberty to discriminate, then there is no freedom and there is no liberty, because that's what freedom and liberty is. You making choices, you discriminating, what you want to buy, how you want to build, what you want to grow, who you want to talk to, where you want to live. And if that is taken away from you, your freedom is taken away from you.
Can I interject here?
LSP left for water. I think, is he back?
No, I'm here. Can I interject here?
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to reclaim the term discrimination in the way we're using it. You guys are using discrimination to describe, oh, should I get a Coke or should I get a Pepsi? And it's the dumbest thing. When we're talking about
it's not dumb, son. That's reality.
Can I finish my point, lady? Jesus.
Let him finish his point.
When we're talking about discrimination, what we very clearly mean is picking a subsection of society that has historically been denied access to some other part of society and keeping them from it, right? On the basis of their characteristics. That's what we mean by discrimination. So black or gay, these are things that people discriminate, or woman.
Okay, but like, so what?
Okay, so are you okay with marrying a man and calling a man your wife? That just doesn't make any sense.
I want to take.
Was that really what you took away from that?
I want to take issue with that. I want to take issue with that because like that is going to be local for each area. Yeah, in certain areas of the South, it's going to be black people. In certain areas, it might be Irish people. In certain areas, it might be Italians. Like I'm in New York, and this is like our history. You're kind of taking a single issue that the Civil Rights Bill was made and applying it to the nation, and that's simply not respecting the local character of a neighborhood. Like you're applying a national figure to a local issue that was limited to like several states in the South, and that is going to create. All that's going to do is create new discriminations against new people that will have new victimhoods in 100 years. Like you're not solving a problem.
You're not solving
the problem. You're just giving it to someone else to have that fight in 100 years.
So on that note, Ray has something she wants to say. We will address that, and then we will move on to the final piece, which will take up probably about an hour. So
Yeah, so I have two things I wanted to bring here. And so the first one is to address the process by which this case arrives at the court, because even the way this article is written seems strange. And people can correct me if I'm wrong on this, because it's entirely possible that I heard the wrong quote-unquote version of this story, and it's been corrected since then. But this article reads, the state was unconstitutionally enlisting her in creating a message she opposes. Except this apparently never occurred, because Laurie Smith, who has got us all discussing this, was apparently like on level 75 Karen and couldn't find anyone who would
I agree
actually
with
do
that.
this to her. And so
Yeah, I heard about
instead
that.
of
Yeah.
instead of actually like taking it to the Supreme Court because someone had come to her and tried to force her to bake the cake, quote unquote, this had never happened because no one could actually be bothered to do that. And so she essentially imagined a hypothetical situation in which someone actually cared enough to
that
go
is
through the
up
process
a
of trying to
situation,
force her to
actually.
do this.
She didn't even
And
imagine,
then
she made it
took
up.
that. Yeah. And so she took it to the Supreme Court, presented it as though it had occurred when it had never occurred. And so it was almost like she was bringing a case in which the person opposite her did not exist.
Yeah,
There was no LGBTQ person that wanted to actually force her to make a website that she didn't want to make and wasn't even attempting to do so. They would just go somewhere else.
That is allowed in certain cases where you can bring up a hypothetical to the court.
Has this ever been done before?
Yeah, there's been issues like that. Like even with I think the way Roe versus Wade was done was that way. Like Roe versus Wade originated from a hypothetical abortion case.
No, there was a real complaint.
I thought there was a real Roe and a real Wade.
Yeah, but she wasn't actually getting an abortion. She was just like saying she was.
She was suing for the right to abortion, state law.
Yeah,
state law.
it was similar. I think no.
Let's
So
not
hold
any
on.
further. Let's move to the main event. It's already late.
Okay, I just want to add one more thing. Roe v. Wade was more so in the same context as Scope's monkey trial, where you had Jonathan
Scopes.
Jonathan Scopes was like, oh yeah, I'm a Christian. I probably taught evolution at some point because these textbooks like already kind of have it in it. So I guess I guess just to see what will happen, I'll step up and do that.
That is allowed in U.S. law, where you bring a hypothetical. It's like the Solomon case, where you bring a hypothetical to the king and he makes a judgment.
Okay, but I mean, but you can also create a statement from the hypothetical case you bring to the court. So let's say, for example, if I were an American citizen, which God forbid that should never occur, but if it did
last
occur,
statement, right before we move on to the last,
and let's say that I brought to the Supreme Court a hypothetical case in which, like, I don't know, everyone is chasing me around in KKK clan hoods or something, and what do I do in that situation? Kind of structure. And then, of course, someone asked me later, did this ever actually happen? And I'm like, no, of course not. It's a hypothetical. But of course, by the time we get to that point, I've already tarred you all with this brush, haven't I? Because now you're the KKK mafia that's somehow coming for me, except it never happened.
Yeah, that has happened.
With this LGBTQ thing, Laurie Smith is making it look like some kind of LGBTQ mafia was chasing her around or something, except that never occurred.
That's a good example of that actually happening is the crying fire in a theater, where that was just a hypothetical brought before the court, and then they made that like as a limited free speech. Like you can do that in U.S. law. You can just bring up a hypothetical.
Just given as an example in the case, it was testing the Espionage Act's restriction on free speech.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, but I mean,
if there was an actual case, there was standing with that, is what I'm saying. Like all of these cases you guys are listing, these are actual cases where people actually had standing. This lady, Laurie Smith, was never harmed by anybody.
I don't have a problem with that.
That's what I wanted to highlight, because I hope you all understand how these things can be used in this weird way. Because then if a thing didn't happen, everyone who's been commenting on this on social media or in the news have been commenting on it as though it did happen.
Yeah, this happens all the time. This isn't controversial. This is a way in which the U.S. law works.
Yeah, no, that's just a given here. That happens a lot.
Yeah, I don't know if you're saying that's like shocking or anything, but that's very normal.
I mean, it just seems to me that smart individuals who are politically minded can essentially create panic out of nothing, because they know that news organizations will report on the things that didn't happen as though they did happen.
Yes, the system's very flawed in that way. Yes,
it would lead me to believe that this had actually occurred if I had not gone further to find out whether it did.
Yeah, you're discovering a fluke of U.S. law. That happens all the time.
Yeah.
No, this doesn't happen all the time. What Laurie Smith did in Sudan does not happen all the time. Usually you have to have standing based on some actual harm produced by the law. She just invented something. Nothing happened.
Usually, yeah. But why is that a bad thing? Like that's okay. Then you're creating a case before you need a
I
Pigpen. That's
I
great.
think we I think we I think
It's a
in
bad
this
thing
case
because-
we've LSP. I just want to say I think we've pretty much all stated our opinions on this. I don't think it really does much use to continue debating it. Again, like we've all stated our opinions. I don't want to waste any more time that could be spent discussing the next issue. But if anybody has, I will let each of you say have a final comment on this, and then we will move on. Nobody no one respond to each other. Just say anything, any final thought on the issue, and that's it. So we'll go in order. We'll start with Yiz.
Oh, I got nothing else to say. We're good. Let's move on.
Lieutenant Templar or El Templar, whatever your name is.
I mean, in most Supreme Court cases, the justification for a ruling comes from a hypothetical condition. If you read the arguments, the argument is usually reliant on a hypothetical to make law out of a court case. This is completely natural. It's not a controversial thing or even a bad thing. The courts have a right to propose a hypothetical in order to say what's right and wrong. This will always be an aspect of U.S. law. It's kind of just the way it works.
Yep.
LSP.
Sorry.
Oh.
Yeah, this wasn't brought up as a hypothetical. This was presented like this was something she actually had. Lori Smith lied and claimed that she'd been asked by somebody to produce a website that somebody did not actually ask her to do. She just straight up lied. I don't know why we're pussyfooting with this idea that it's a hypothetical. This didn't happen.
No, we're not pussyfooting about this.
Could I please talk, please?
Guys, everybody.
Just let me
one
talk.
one by one, we're not responding to each other's individual comments. We are just stating our final thoughts on this. Man,
okay, it's so hard to get a word in with this lady. The purpose of anti-discrimination laws are valid, right? It's to stop some subsection of society that has been historically discriminated against from experiencing worse results or worse discrimination as a product of individual biases or prejudice. This person receives public accommodations, right? They receive taxpayer support in the police that protect their business. They receive taxpayer support in the roads that support their business, that sustain their business. They receive taxpayer support in the entire infrastructure that supports their business. I don't think it's unreasonable to say that if you get all of this from taxpayers, in exchange, you should have to serve the general public, regardless of your personal prejudices against people with different sexual orientations.
Okay, Ray?
I mean, it just feels strange to me because of the fact that, again, the case was one where she brought something that hadn't actually happened to her. And so even if, my feeling on this is that even if we had gone through this situation of discovering this story and reading this story back and then being sort of shocked and surprised by the fact that it didn't actually happen, the kind of thing that she seems to have been worried about, that people were going to show up at her business and demand that she should produce a website that diverged with her values. Apparently it is so unlikely that this will occur that no one had actually done this in the time that she had operated the business. And so I would think that even if a person were taking the more, quote, liberty-minded, if we're going to call it that, and placing air quotes around this perspective of, being able to pick and choose between who you want to, provide business to, you should at least wait until you have been sort of brigaded. You should at least wait until you've been brigaded by the libs before bringing a case to the Supreme Court about it. That's my sort of middle-of-the-road position on this. At least wait until they have come for you then, and don't bring a case that never happened. Try to pass it off as though it did happen, and then create this huge sensation in the media and have everyone running around in circles about how, they're going to force you to make websites you don't agree with, only then to find out that no one has ever done this.
All right, Damnation.
I already said what I needed to say. We can move on.
All right, at that we're not discussing this anymore. We're moving on to the main course of the evening. All right, so Supreme Court on affirmative action, eliminating racial discrimination means ending all of it. What do you think the Supreme Court? What do you think the decision was? What was the ratio? 6-3, of course.
It is.
Common trend of the evening, but they have ruled that race-based affirmative actions has violated the 14th Amendment. So the Supreme Court has struck down race-based affirmative action in college admissions in a 6-3 decision. Court ruled that both Harvard and North Carolina University's admissions policies engaged in unlawful racial discrimination, violating the 14th Amendment. Stands at almost 50 years of legalized racial discrimination in college admissions process. Eliminating racial discrimination means eliminating all of it. John Roberts. The ruling in the Students for Fair Admissions versus President and Fellows of Harvard College marks a decisive victory for those who have long hailed the practice as unjust and unconstitutional. It also reaffirms the reading of the 14th Amendment as prohibiting racial discrimination in all but the narrowest of circumstances, even when such discrimination is done in the service of an otherwise noble goal. So yeah, I think that's pretty much all that needs to be read on that right there. We're all aware of this. This was the biggest one out of
Can I go first?
all of these in the news. So, pardon?
Can I go first?
I'd like us to go.
first.
I'd like us to go in order.
Okay.
So yes, through damnation. And again, this just has to do with the order in which people entered. It has nothing to do with me favoring.
Oh, Ray can go. I'll let Ray go first.
I'll swap.
No, I'm
with
just
Ray.
saying it starts with Yiz and then goes to you.
Oh, okay. Fair enough.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I mean, if it's just in terms of order of who entered, no problem. Then go ahead.
Okay.
What about this exactly do you want me to talk about? What angle?
No, well, we're opening with our thoughts and our positions on the ruling itself, and then anything like any other additional analysis you want to provide before we move into the actual discussion piece.
Oh, well, obviously I don't like affirmative action, never have. And if it goes away, good. So I like it.
I am pro affirmative action for my people. That's that simple. I'm selfish.
Ugh.
I should have more resources because of me.
Yeah, no.
LSP?
Ray, would you like to go before me?
I could if you really want me to.
I have no opinion either which way, but I
Okay.
assume we're going to probably agree with each other.
I mean, we'll see. I might have the only opinion that stands out from everyone here because I think that mine might be the sort of counterintuitive one. But okay, I'll go ahead then. And so, as far as I understand it, it was a Asian rights advocacy group that originally sort of brought this, and it was it a lawyer named Bloom who quote helped them to bring this, and of course, obviously the this is where it all went wrong. So we've been cucked again, basically, and I'll explain how. So how this should have gone, I'll describe how it should have gone, and then I'll explain to you what has actually happened. And so what should have happened if we were going to be doing sort of, the Asian rights group outcome, the ideal outcome for Asian applicants would have been, first off, to level down this playing field, i.e. remove the way that affirmative action has been done up until now, so that you don't have Asian applicants being discriminated against for being Asian on the basis that you have Harvard or Yale and so on coming up with increasingly bizarre ways of saying that you don't have sufficient personality, whatever that means. And so now you have to score extremely higher than everyone else in order just to break even, right? So you've had that problem. I'm using this in very simplified explanation because I don't want to have to be here giving paragraphs to explain how that works. I think we all understand how the affirmative action process works. It was obviously disadvantaging Asian people, but what it should have been done is that there should have been a link between the removal of affirmative action as it currently is operated should have been combined with the removal of legacy admissions. Because if you don't do both of these at the same time, then we still lose. Because we're still going to get crowded out by legacy admissions. And so we're getting cucked, to put it lightly. Additionally, on top of that, the second thing out of two things is that the Supreme Court ruling doesn't even actually help us if you read out exactly what it actually says. And so just to give a quotation from People's Policy Project, who were kind enough to essentially break it all down for us, I'll just give a quotation from them. In its statement responding to the judgment, Harvard University made it fairly clear that it's actually still going to engage in race-conscious admissions along the lines prescribed by the court's decision. And of course, what was this court's decision? So Harvard responded, today the Supreme Court delivered its decision in Students for Fair Admissions versus President and Fellows of Harvard College. The court held that Harvard College's admission system does not comply with the principles of the Equal Protection Clause embodied in Title 6 of the Civil Rights Act. The court also ruled that colleges and universities may consider in admissions decisions, quote, an applicant's discussion of how race affected his or her life, be it through discrimination, inspiration, or otherwise. We will certainly comply with the court's decision. And so what this means to quote their summary of this, is the case in question was brought by an organization purporting to represent Asian applicants to selective universities. The plaintiffs argued that Harvard University and the University of North Carolina were discriminated against Asian applicants in order to limit how many Asians were in each incoming class. The court decided that the way Harvard and UNC was handling Asian applicants does violate the Constitution, but also clarified that race-conscious admissions are still possible so long as they are done in a certain way. Indeed, the new rules seem like they could actually make it even easier for schools to discriminate against Asian applicants in the way that the plaintiffs had complained about. So basically getting owned, and legacy admissions still continue. And so now it means that all they have to do in order to do their discrimination is to be more explicit about it, which of course they have indicated they're very happy to do. So the whole thing was a complete waste of time because they went to this particular lawyer who wasn't really trying to actually serve the interests of Asian applicants at all. All they've done is they've removed affirmative action, quote unquote, but kept the part that allows them to discriminate against Asian students through various personality tests and, the writing of essays on how race affected you. So you're still revealing to the admissions process what race you are and how you feel about that, and then they can choose to discriminate against you on that basis. And then legacy admissions still exist, and so all of the white people who have been getting into these universities for the past, 15 quadrillion years still have the ability to continue to just re-enter anyway on legacy.
But
so,
the white people who have not had a chance to get in also have a better chance of getting in now because they have removed the affirmative action policies.
Well, only if the people in the admissions process decide that their discussion of how they feel about race meets, their sort of opaque requirements as to how they're going to balance this out. So, I mean, it allows them to continue to discriminate. Just they need to stylize it differently. So I feel as though nothing of value has been accomplished. And
then this is going to go back to the point what we were talking about in the last segment, where if it's a private institution, I mean, they should be. I don't see anything. I mean, as long as they're not taking federal grants or federal funding or anything, I think they should be allowed to discriminate across the board.
Just to be clear,
I'm aware Harvard is private.
So this actually brings back something that was mentioned earlier on in the conversation, which is now coming back to I guess to menace you all, except for me and LSP, who said you shouldn't be doing this in the first place in a way, which means that now you're saying that, okay, the admission team, if they're at a private college, can now just look at your application and be like, well, I don't like the way that you feel about, your relationship to race in America. And so we're sort of putting you to the side. Should they be allowed to do that? I say no.
So LSP, you go.
Ray, I am disappointed in you, girl. How could you let me down?
I knew this was going to happen.
Why did you?
I'd like to just point out, I fully agree with her. By the way,
I told you yes.
At all.
Yeah, you told me I would, and I do. I agree.
So grades are not everything, right? The schools that you go to want to incorporate more elements than just your grades when they consider whether or not to admit you in school, right? Universities want to make somebody who's well-rounded holistically, right? And it's not just grades that you need to focus on. Oftentimes, grades just reveal who's richer than other people, right? Because there's an obvious correlation between high grades and higher socioeconomic status. Why
don't they focus on economics as opposed? Oh, sorry.
Because we have not all our society has not been carved and structured by socioeconomics more so than it has been by race. We've been very, very deliberately race conscious for all of society. And I don't think the 14th Amendment says that you have.
God, I wish.
Could I please talk? Jesus, just try it. Your best, woman. The 14th Amendment. I don't think the Equal Protection Clause requires that we pretend race doesn't exist. Race clearly does. Race has been incorporated into society everywhere, right? And Black people have historically been at the losing ends of that. Affirmative action has helped them, right? There are studies that demonstrate that Black people and brown people who benefit from affirmative action end up being of a higher socioeconomic status. They end up having more class mobility, that it's actually better for Black and brown people to go to college because of affirmative action, right? And there's California famously rolled back their affirmative action program 20 years ago by state referendum. And the result of that was fewer Black and brown applicants. The reason, Ray, you want to incorporate race into these questions, not that we're going to get into the response. We'll get into the back and forth. But the reason you want to incorporate race into these questions is because race clearly affects us. And it doesn't affect us all in the same way. Some of us are hurt by race and some of us are helped by race. This is the concept of privilege, right?
I mean, I do agree with you on that.
Yeah, so
it's just that we're then trusting the admissions process to sort of take those feelings into account, or not just those feelings, but those structures into account, and then make decisions that are not prejudiced, right? Like, let's say the admissions process just doesn't like Asian people.
The admission process is supposed to be prejudicial. They're supposed to be looking at you in terms both your grades, even your background, right? Your economic status, all of that stuff. They're supposed to incorporate all of this in determining whether or not you're a good fit for a school. And the reason that's valuable is because it provides diversity of insight, right? Students, can I talk, please? Just let me talk.
Let LSP talk, and then we'll let Damnation talk, and then we'll open it up for like full discussion with responses.
You ever notice that it's me who constantly gets this?
You're wrong.
Yeah.
Everybody except LSP, shut up.
Yeah, that would be nice. Race, the fuck. That's why like interruptions are so horrible, because they derail you. Shit. Yeah, just fuck it. Go for it, Damnation.
Damnation.
No. I can prompt you. I know what you were going to respond to.
Yeah, what you were saying.
You were saying that my assertion that they shouldn't be looking at what you wrote as how you're affected by background or by your interaction with the structure of race in American society is.
Yes.
And then you were stopped there. Yes,
and it's absolutely relevant. So Black people have been discriminated against. Like our society has been structured in a way to benefit white people and disadvantage Black people, and it seems very relevant to mention that. If you are white, I guess the questions of race never really are relevant insofar as like your admission to college goes. But if you're Black, historically, colleges didn't let you in. Black people were disallowed in colleges, right? Like this was something that we only recently had to change in our history. Affirmative action is a form of remediation, and it produces a diversity of viewpoints. Diversity of viewpoints produces better students who understand racial issues better, who understand different points of view better, who understand the life and background and culture of people of different lifestyles, different backgrounds, and different cultures. That produces a better society. Okay, there you go, Damnation.
Yeah, I have. I wanted to say something, but I'll wait.
No, you can go after Damnation.
It's really simple. I agree with this decision. Go ahead. Let's open up the.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna say I think private communities and private individuals and universities ought to have the right to build the structure that they want. If a historically Black college wants to have like 90% Black students, they should. That's not diverse, I will say. You're not going to get a very wide spectrum of opinions from just Black students, but they have the right to do that. I think they should have the right to do that. And likewise, if some Ivy League wants to be all white, they should have the right to do that. I don't have a problem with discrimination, either be a private business or a university. I think if a bunch of Black people want to get together and found a university for Black people, not diversity, just Black people, they should have that right. They should have a right to exclude everyone else, and they should have the right to educate their own as they see fit by their moral character or educational background, however they wish. It's a
Amen,
right,
brother.
It's a right to build. Well, let me finish that. It's a right for a community to establish institutions that they want to cater to them. You don't have a right to force diversity. You have a right to establish things for your own people. I grew up in New York, and I've seen this a lot in Harlem. It works. It makes people good. People aren't going to intrinsically trust their own than some random person claiming that they're bad or good. So when a bunch of Harlem folk went and found a Black school for Black people and only Black people, good. It is a good thing when people come together as a family and a culture to establish institutions that serve them and only them.
Well said.
Okay, but the thing is, if the United States is going down that path, then why do they not announce this to the rest of planet Earth? I know I'm getting a little bit geopolitical by pointing it out this way, but they keep presenting themselves as like this meritocratic beacon on the hill that has somehow amassed like intelligence, wealth, and power, and that what you should do is you should raise up your children and send them to an Ivy League school in the United States so that they can become immersed in American culture, blah, blah, etc. And then when you get there, they've got 5,001 hurdles that say, you're really good at taking tests and you're really smart, but we've decided that you are the wrong type of person. And so, I mean, how does this comport with the meritocratic thing that America keeps selling itself on? Are you saying that America should stop selling itself on that if they're not going to actually do it? Because the whole reason that Asian applicants had to bring this in the first place, even though of course they've been defrauded here by the lawyer who's brought it because they've not done it properly, but imagine the motivation behind why they brought this in the first place is because clearly they were indeed being discriminated against.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a fan.
Do you agree that they were discriminated against then?
Yeah, they were discriminated against.
And you're saying you're saying that you're okay with the fact that the Ivy League schools discriminated against East Asian and South Asian, for that matter, applicants, despite the fact that those applicants outperformed academically many of the people who were chosen over them.
Yeah, yes, the private institution. Now that said, public institutions should be expected to cater to the public as their communities see fit, as they please. You know, the democracy and all that. I don't have a problem with Ivy League doing that. I don't have a problem with that at all. If it's a public school with public funding, you know, in New York we have CUNY and SUNY for public education. Yeah, maybe you should expect the ratios of the students to make up the community itself because it's taxpayer funded. But if you're a private institution, do what you want that sees fit to make the character you want. You're a private institution. You serve who you want. Technically, you cater to your donators and shareholders and all that nonsense.
So you're on my side here, Templar. You disagree with this ruling, right? You think Harvard should be allowed to consider race?
Yeah, I think they should be allowed to discriminate as they please. I don't think it should be like, oh, black people are more oppressed. It's like, no, I don't care about that. I'd be happy for. I mean,
to be clear again, I don't think this ruling. Yeah. I don't think this ruling prevents them from discriminating. It just tells them that they should, but they should do it with different wording.
It's more honest, and I'm always happy for formalization of realistic policies. I mean, I don't think that they're going to get the results that they want in myself, because I think there's a lot more that goes into just like here's an education. Now you're an ideal American. I don't think that works that way.
Civilization is not communicable.
Yeah, I think a black school will create a character that is black, not American. I don't think it's going to be American. And
what is American character? Wait, what does that even mean?
Anglo. I'm going to just say Anglo. It is
okay,
racist.
so Anglo. Black people can't be American no matter what, then, right?
They can be black American.
To be fair, black Americans.
They can be black Americans.
To be fair, they're Scots Irish.
Why is Anglo get to be like the monopoly on American and not black?
Because it's a country made by us.
You see, I agree with LSP on this one.
I'm being honest with you on this.
This is just an aside, but I kind of feel like people of African descent are the only people in the United States who didn't get a choice as to whether they wanted to be American or not. They don't have a choice to be something else because they were abducted from their homeland and stripped of their original identity, so they have no other options.
So were the half dozen colonies founded by religious refugees. It doesn't matter. Like they were kicked out of the country. They're kicked out. They're kicked out of their country, or kidnapped, or stolen.
Okay, but they were free to establish a society. Black people weren't. Black people were in bondage and slavery for the better part of 4 centuries here.
I don't care about that. If I had my way, I'd let them have an entire state to make as they please. I think we should. I think we should give blacks like a state. I think they should have.
So you're for reparations then?
You know my saying. I like reparations for repatriation.
Yep.
I think that they should be. I mean, I think the Liberian Project was a great idea. I think the blacks that went sent back to Liberia founded a very nice society that was very successful because they had the opportunity to build something for themselves, and they did well. And when the Soviet Revolution happened over there and fucked it all up, it messed up a very good project. I'm a big fan of communities building things for themselves. I use black people as an example because I grew up around Harlem and I know how it works. I say how it works. It works well when people have a sense of ownership of the things they build for themselves.
I mean, I feel like that's an escape valve, though, because there's a large amount of like American wealth that was extracted from their labor, and then to turn around and say that their bodies should be like sent to a different location, safely away from the place that you have stripped their wealth.
Slaves do not.
Seems weird to me.
Life isn't fair.
Slaves do not contribute very much to the economy.
Yeah, life should be fair, though.
Life will never be fair. You're never going to have fairness.
I mean, do you not agree that would be profoundly unfair if someone abducted someone from a different location, had them assist unwillingly in the creation of a platform on which you grew wealth, and then afterwards, when they turn around and ask you what exactly just went on here, you tell them, "Don't worry, you can go the other way back to the place that we abducted you from."
Let
me answer it. I'm a mixture of Irish and Jewish heritage. I don't care about the abuse of my ancestors. It doesn't matter to me. Like you don't get to pick the what you start with in life. You don't. It's never gonna happen. You'll never have.
Yeah, that's kind of the problem. People who are starting in life with like nothing, who are trying to go to school, right? And now they can't factor in the fact that they're, as a race, we're targeted to have nothing. That's kind of the issue here.
That's not something you can.
So the issue is that you produce. Yes, it is. Affirmative action fixed it. So the issue is you produce reserves.
No, it doesn't. God, that's so retarded.
Yes, it does. I'm sorry, you're too retarded to understand. Let me explain it.
No.
Affirmative action. Let me explain it. I need to help for the retard back there.
I don't want the explanation because I'm going to reject it.
Not you. It's for the other retard.
I don't care. I just want to say, I want to say affirmative action doesn't work, but I do think Black people should be the right to found community colleges and institutions that serve them. Because it caters to them. Yeah, and throw in some federal funding if you want, if the government feels inclined.
I mean, with what
action-
accumulates to
affirmative
wealth, would they
action
do
does
that?
work.
I mean, when you say throw in some federal funding, who is gonna put forward that federal funding? I mean, in some cases, then you're
Blue
asking.
states.
I mean, if you look at the population of the United States and where they're distributed, they actually live in the precise states where they're least likely to get such funding. Like, who's going to be giving that to them? Like people who are in. Let me think of these states here: Florida. Who runs
sorry to interrupt. One of the examples that this is kind of, I mean, this is more of a Appalachian thing, but you know, there is an Appalachian fund that funds poor Appalachian communities. Why don't we have one for African Americans? Like, there's a senatorial fund to fund poor, impoverished Appalachian communities because they were abandoned after the coal mines and just kind of left to rot.
So which party is going to put that into effect?
If we're going to have affirmative action, why not do it based specifically on area of, I guess, in terms of economic, like in terms of prosperity, I guess, in terms of median income.
I've already
in a
explained
specific.
this.
I don't know, but why don't we structure it like that then? Because we have the capacity to do that.
A poor white person is not the same as a poor Black person, and the insights.
I'm glad you disagree. I'm glad you agreed.
Would you say that a wealthier Black person has it difficult than a poorer white person?
No, I wouldn't say that, but they have a different insight than a poor white person.
Well, they have a different insight. Of course, everybody has a different insight.
Well,
everyone has their own experience. And you know, this is where I actually think the term lived experience actually does have validity.
Oh, Jesus.
Okay, because we have different lived experiences based on our race, because America has never been a race-blind country. So the reason you want to do it based on race is because you want a diversity of viewpoints, right? Not a diversity of economic backgrounds. You can get diverse viewpoints from economic backgrounds. That should absolutely be counted. Sure. I have no problem with incorporating socioeconomic status into considerations. Race should be considered too, because our society has been structured by race. It's relevant to the backgrounds of many people in this country.
Why should a Black college
need
need the opinion of a random Italian?
Why should a what?
Why should a Black college need the opinion and diversity of opinion of a random Italian guy? Why is that needed?
Because it contributes to greater knowledge and understanding about the opinions of other people who aren't Black.
Okay,
it makes smarter students.
I just want to jump in with one thing here before you all go further.
One point. If you look at like global ranked colleges, usually the ones that do the best are from homogenous societies in Asia that aren't giving a shit about Western thought that much. Like, I don't agree with the claim that diversity opinion creates better students. It just doesn't.
Okay, but
global ranked college, the best colleges are here in the United States.
You've also just argued that those Asian students should be excluded, though.
I don't care if they want to exclude. Yeah, I'm okay with the discrimination. If a bunch of Asians want to found an Asian school, good. Like, it should serve them. It'll probably serve them better than a diverse school because it's more focused.
Indeed.
Like, you can't serve multiple things. This is the thing. Like,
you realize you contradicted yourself like 10 times now, right?
I'm not arguing for her. I'm arguing for me.
I know. I'm talking to Liz, who keeps going amen to things that are contradicting her previous position. It doesn't even realize it. Sorry. Go on.
Things.
No, I do realize it. I'm just concealing my power level for now.
Its institutions are founded to serve a purpose, and once you start diversifying the purpose, they become less efficient.
The purpose is to create educated students.
And define education.
Intelligence, right?
Define intelligence.
Learn it about the world. Intelligence about the world.
Well,
that's the circumstances of the people around.
I'm sorry, but like,
physics doesn't. The ability to critically think. The ability to critically think.
Physics doesn't care what culture you came from. It cares if you know what atoms are. Okay, like you're talking about primarily a liberal arts perspective. Okay, fine. If you want to create a liberal arts school that has a diverse opinion, maybe add more than just the Greeks. If you want to do that, you're fine to do that. But if I'm going to send my kid to a college, I hope they learn like how the universe works, because I'm more science oriented. I don't care about social
think about it. Well, just to jump back in again there, I mean, if you're primarily interested in STEM, you're again arguing earlier that you would want to block Asian students who are mostly STEM students because you have no issue with people discriminating against people who come from Asian backgrounds. And so this is one of those weird things where
I'm not seeing the contradiction.
You agree with LSP, but you want to use the kind of system that he would create to do the opposite of what he wants to do with it. And so it's come to this kind of weird position where, in some sense, of course, I disagree with both of you. It's just that you are sort of accidentally making LSP look more reasonable than I had intended to make him look when I came to argue against him, which shouldn't happen.
I'm aware that Asians outperform whites all the time, and if it was purely merit-based, they dominate, absolutely. Again, like if a university wants to prevent that domination from it, I'm from an intrinsically better education background. And again, I would say it's not necessarily because of their race, it's because they have a better family raising structure in a lot of instances. But like, I'm okay with that. I'm like, a university, I guarantee you if you had a university that was dedicated to just Asian students, they'd make like Nobel Prize holders every year probably. But that's probably because they're already have an established family network and kin structure that will benefit each other. Blacks don't, and now it would be nice if they could start working together, create something that creates that.
I'm not even certain that it comes down to something as simple as that, because Asian families are indeed diverse as well, right? I don't think I don't think everyone is coming from the perfect.
Yeah, diversity means fewer white people, and all Asians are certainly diverse because there's no white people.
I'll say that the ones that come here usually from the the immigration statuses, it's usually because they're high achievers. If you go to a random Chinese village,
I'm talking about. I'm talking about also people who are descendants of those who came perhaps like Vietnamese refugees, for example, are often bringing these same complaints as well. And their families are not, how can I put this? Their families are not wealthy, affluent, or entirely always functional, but they go through the process, and the meritocracy, if it existed, would promote them to a higher station from which they first originated. It's just that you've got, I think, LSP almost accidentally arguing that admissions people should be able to discriminate against them if they felt like, and I'm assuming that he's hoping they would not choose to do so in a sort of petulant way. Whereas you're saying that you hope that they would really do so on purpose.
Okay,
and it's almost as though I came originally with the expectation I might be arguing with LSP, but I actually do believe that LSP is more reasonable than you on this.
I'm okay with that. Like, I think that, like, yeah, if you have, you could probably conk it up to race and genetics why they overachieve if you want, but I would
want to go down there.
I would think there's other reasons, but
I might want to remark that there's no reason to think that somebody whose race is considered does not have the merits to be in school. In fact, studies show they tend to perform just fine when they are admitted, even with affirmative action applicants. On that note, though, if you've got two people, right, vying for the same job, and one has a race that has been insanely disadvantaged background, right, and their race is incorporated into that, and one hasn't, right. If you're a real meritocracy, you're going to look at the person from the disadvantaged background as if they have more to provide because they had to overcome more. So I kind of reject this idea that grades are the end all be all of meritocracy. I don't think they are. And I think that's a very narrow way of looking at your possible pool of applicants in society. Schools have a. I'm sorry, what's that?
I was going to say, if you're a private business and you want to measure that for employment, you have a right to. I don't have a problem with that. If you think that people that came from hard backgrounds are going to be harder workers, you're probably right, and I'm more than happy to let you do that. I'm not going to. I think you have a right to discriminate as a private business.
So I have a question for you. This is kind of more based on, I guess, anecdotal experience, but again, it has to do with back what LSP was talking about earlier. About, again, it's not about economics; it's about race. So, again, this is just anecdotal experience, and this was a decade ago, so it really doesn't matter at this point. But one of my top universities that I ended up applying to, I only got waitlisted for. However, there was another student at my school. I didn't have a problem with the guy, but so this was back when the SAT was on the 2400 scale. I ended up getting a 1900 on the SAT, which, like, even 30 years ago, I would have been one of the first applicants accepted into that school with that score. So I had a 1900 SAT. I wrote a very strong admissions essay. I did supplemental essays. I did SAT subject tests. I did a bunch of extracurriculars. I had a 4.1 GPA. I was like fifth in my class. This other guy, so he was African American. He was from the same economic bracket as myself. He only got a 1450 on the SAT, and he did some extracurriculars. Not as many as I did. He didn't play a sport or anything. I played 3 sports. And he ended up getting accepted into that school, and I didn't. How is that fair?
I don't think it should be fair.
Higher, there's a diversity fire, my friend. You found that out the hard way.
I'm just asking.
That's an important thing. The only way you can achieve diversity is by replacing people, because unless you're building a new building or adding more seats, you're replacing people.
Yep.
Now, I don't care how you want to replace people, because I think you have a right to discriminate the students you want. But be honest, you are replacing people. You are replacing one history. And if you want to group people in that, fine. But then, like, if a bunch of white people that didn't get into school want to found a school for themselves, they should have that right to, because, hey, you replace them. Why don't they have a right to found something to serve them?
Absolutely.
So I was hoping LSP would be here to hear that, but he had to step away for a moment. I want to hear Ray's position on this, and then I guess I'll repeat myself more briefly when LSP gets back.
I mean, to me, it feels like a fun. It doesn't feel great, right? To hear that kind of story, because, again, you're given this impression that you're going to be graded on academic performance, and it doesn't quite happen that way.
Correct.
Exactly. That's my point.
I mean, I don't think that I'm unreasonable for thinking that there should at least be some connection, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely not. And I say 2 wrongs don't make a right. Just because it was...
2 wrongs in this case.
2 wrongs. No, but yeah.
How could I not make that joke? It was perfect.
Okay, that was good timing. Yes, we're not gonna lie. But yeah, no. I mean, 2 wrongs don't make it. It's like, just because. I mean, I guess it also, you can make a comparison to, like, for instance, you see race washing in modern cinema. There was a historically, like, you would always see white characters or white actors playing explicitly non-white characters. Like, you had what was it? John Wayne as Genghis Khan, or
that was ridiculous.
Or my personal favorite, Mickey Rooney as Mr. Ianoshi in Breakfast at Tiffany's.
Oh yeah, that character's a delight.
It's like, to the point where it's so over the top and offensive, you can't help but find it funny. Just as like what we were thinking. It was like offensive even by standards back then. That's how funny it is. Like, no, but now you see it. They're almost overcorrecting themselves, and now you see, for instance, blackwashing, brownwashing of, like, characters that explicitly it doesn't make sense, and it's like they're doing, and it's like, okay, I understand why they are doing that. It's for the sake of representation, but it doesn't work in that context. 2 wrongs don't make a right, and it goes the same exact. So why should a history of discrimination against one particular group of people? In what way does that morally justify discrimination against the other group? It
doesn't. It's
exactly.
at the end of the day, it is anti-white. It just is.
I can't be honest and say that it is anything. It is anything but.
Like, again, like, if you want to found an anti-white university, you should have the right to.
I mean, I consider it primarily anti-Asian more than it's anti-white. If you look
at
it is. Who's getting rejected?
Again, like, this is an example of, once you start seeking diversity, someone's gonna lose out on the pie, because you can't. Equality is impossible. It's a myth. It's one of those utopian ideals.
As controversial as it may sound, one way to have leveled this without having to do this kind of personal assessment through admissions policy, where people are reading people's essays and making decisions on the basis of their writing about their lived experience, would have been to not do any of that, like, just not do it at all, and instead do the thing that was suggested at the very beginning of this whole conversation back at the start of the stream, which is eliminate the student debt, eliminate the need for people to pay out of their own pocket for education in the first place, subsidize everything from the start. That would mean that when LSP brings up his point of people who are less wealthy happen to be people of particular racial backgrounds who are then disadvantaged, who then need to be given a bonus advantage when they enter an application, that wouldn't need to occur anymore, because everyone's already been paid for. That's my specific problem. You don't have to deal with the wealth disparity issue if you just deal with the wealth disparity issue before any of this manifests. Like, have your first intervention in, like, when children are, like, let's say, I don't know, 9 years old or something, have, like, a take on, like, okay, is everyone equalized at this point? Like, is everyone able to afford everything that they need in order to make sure that they can have a successful childhood and develop into an adult in a way that allows them to flourish? Do that, and then you don't have the, quote, race problem when you get all the way to university. You don't even have to do all that.
All right, I want to congratulate you for coming to the wonderful world of distributism. which is perhaps the best solution of all problems.
LOL. Well, I mean, it's what's the word for it? I'm completely agnostic as to how you want to do this. I mean, you can do it with guild socialism, you can do it with distributism, you can do it by just literally establishing a government agency that's handing out stacks of money to individual people. Like, I mean, I don't care how it's done. I mean, it can be done in any way you want, really.
The wonderful world of distributism.
School choice.
The wonderful world of distributism holds that the government should give to people to produce. Like socialism wants to own the means of production, capitalism wants to privatize the means of production. Distributism says you should have the means of production yourself. And you just discovered the wonderful world of distributism and how it solves so many problems.
Indeed.
The government should.
Has LSP returned yet?
I don't think so.
No. Okay. Continue. Sorry.
Well, I just want to use the opportunity to point out the wonderful world of distributism and how it solves all our wonderful problems.
Sunday nights hosted by Michael Eisner.
I was going to say, it's too bad David couldn't make it.
Yeah, Dave would probably agree with me on that one. I don't know. Despite calling himself the distributist, he rarely talks about distributism.
I know. Yeah. It's a running gag with Dave on his channel to be like, so when's that video on distributism coming?
I'll AI generate one.
Yeah.
That would be funny. Yeah.
I've had people request I make the Shrek video with AI.
Well, I'm gonna make a Shrek video at some point about how it's actually about eminent domain. But
I mean, this is also one of the reasons why I'm Irish / partially Judaic something Kazakh random mystery meat, and the thing is I come from a quote unquote impoverished and an oppressed group. I don't give a shit. I really don't care.
But then you also come when it comes to economics.
You only mean your Irish side, right?
Yeah, I know, right?
But then you also have to consider when it comes to economic success, Jews, specifically Ashkenazi Jews and Asians, we're not going to get into what the correlation. We're not going to get into the correlation of anything else there. That opens an entirely different can of worms that I really don't want to discuss tonight. Plus, YouTube might not allow it. But they
and because you have me here.
but they do. It is true. It's regardless of whether you take that into account or not, if you ignore that aspect, Ashkenazi Jews and East Asians and South Asians too vastly outperform even whites.
I have to point out one thing about my chosen people. What is the average IQ of Israel itself?
I have no idea.
Careful, boy.
It's like 96. The reason why American Jews outperform is because they didn't let the dumb ones in at Ellis Island. That's why you had a genetic bottleneck. The other ones that got in were the high IQ ones. If you actually look at the average Jewish IQ, it's completely average. It's only that in America it's a local inequality that because we only let in the high IQ ones.
Israel, so you're in the position that that it's not that in terms of hereditary.
A lot of times these issues come down to who you let in, and if you're only letting in the best, they're going to outperform your average. Like if you have a stock population of Anglos that have an IQ range of 86 to 136, and then you let in only 136 IQ Jews, of course they're going to dominate. Of course. You bottleneck the dumb ones out.
Exactly.
So of course they're going to dominate. This is also why I'm not really a fan of immigration, because by definition you're creating an impoverishment of IQs. You're saying, okay, I have a natural range of IQs in my population from 86 to 136, and I'm going to let in only high IQ people from foreign countries. Of course your country's going to be dominated by them.
You're setting yourself up for intellectual takeover. Yeah.
Statistically in this stream,
and I would like to cite the federal government as example of proof of what he just said.
Yeah. No matter how you do, if you have any criteria for how people come into your country that keeps out the dumb ones and the poor ones and the lazy ones, they're going to dominate. You've bottlenecked out the bad ones. That's just the way it's going to go. You're going to create a tight-knit society of high IQ individuals that are going to cater to each other. They're going to dominate. That's the way it works.
So, but back to the specific issue. Well, first of all, we've established that El Templar and Ray Marisami are the highest IQ people, I guess, on this on stream here. They're the smart ones. But in all seriousness, though, I again, and I know this is LSP is. I mean, my compromise for affirmative action. I mean, I'm not. This is just theoretical. Why not make it purely based on economics? I mean, yes, if race does play into it, then that will show within the ultimate results. But why not just structure it in a colorblind way and see how that plays out? I don't see anything wrong with that.
I'll actually.
We already did.
I'll take an LSP point here. I hear myself. I'll take an LSP point, and in the same way that when the Jewish immigrants came in here, they only let in the higher IQ ones, and they dominated. The people getting captured in West Africa were typically the losers and the lower IQ ones that were labor. If you go to West Africa, they don't have the crime rates that American blacks have. They have just as many wars and problems. They don't have the crime rates because the ones that were high IQ stayed there. They were the ones that beat those brother wars, and they sold the loser to here. Like, whenever you have an immigration situation, you're either bringing in, like, if you're bringing in the highest IQ selection criteria, such as with Asians and Jews, they're going to dominate. And if you're bringing, one of the reasons why I'm against slavery isn't because of any moral issues, is because by definition, your slaves are the lowest IQ. They're the people that lost the wars. They're the people that were.
I take issue with that.
Well, I mean, it can be.
I take extreme issue with your position on that. But.
I would say that.
Why? I want to hear why. Why do you take issue with that?
Because at this point, it's like the reason why slavery is immoral. It is purely about consent. If you consent to be a slave or an indentured servant,
he specifically said not morality. He said this is apart from morality. It has nothing to do with morality.
Oh, okay. I thought you were saying. I thought he was saying it's not immoral.
I have plenty.
No, he was talking about just pure functionary number math. Completely amoral look at it.
I'm Catholic. I don't really like slavery. I wouldn't call it a sin. It's disreputable. It's disgusting. And one of the reasons why disadvantages to society to take slaves is because you are inherently taking the losers from us culture. You're taking the groups of people that lost the war. You're taking the groups of people that were already impoverished in their native lands. Like, you're just bringing over the worst. And then, of course, Western Africa today is a lot more stable than other parts of Africa because they got rid of their worst. And the same
what's also really funny, this is something, I mean, this is a little different than what we're discussing right here, but I find it really just kind of ironic about how public opinion towards the legacy of the British Empire is higher in West Africa than it is in the United Kingdom.
Well, look at it from the perspective of the West Africans.
Exactly.
They got rid of their poorest and dumbest. They got all the benefits of infrastructure from the British and French, and today they have functional governments that serve them ethnically only. So, they got the best end of the pie. I mean, they're going to be like the future superpower, honestly.
But especially Nigeria.
IQ is definitely the greatest predictor of civic success.
Success. Yeah, that's not even a controversial statement.
Yeah.
There. But of course, there are more controversial elements to the discussion when it comes to IQ. But this isn't not an IQ discussion. So I just want to actually pose a question to LSP. He had stepped away when I asked that. But so it was.
What's that?
No, so when you stepped away, I gave a personal anecdote.
Oh shit, my headphones aren't working.
Oh, hold on. Tell us when your headphones are. Okay,
working. Yeah.
You're working. Okay, so I gave a personal anecdote about 10 minutes ago.
Shit, they're not working.
Are they working?
I'm just unplugging my headphones. Go for it.
So I give a personal anecdote about something that happened about 10 years ago. So I ended up getting a 1900 on my SAT. I graduated. Fifth in my class, got a 4.1 GPA, played 3 sports, was president of the school paper, or editor-in-chief rather, was in multiple clubs. I was a theater kid back in that life. Yes. I was Javert in Les Mis actually. But so just all of that. So I was like 20 years ago, I would have the schools that I applied to, the top tier schools I applied to, which I either got rejected or waitlisted for, with the exception of course, a couple. But I ultimately, one of the main ones that I was interested in, I ended up only getting waitlisted. However, there was an African American student also. I mean, a nice guy. We were also in theater together. He was of the same socioeconomic bracket as me. I live in a very wealthy area. He only got a 1450 on his SAT. He didn't play any sports. he wasn't particularly involved, with the exception of he was in like he played the lead character in Grease sophomore year. But at the end of the day, he got into that same school, no problem. How is that fair?
It's not. I wouldn't describe that as fair.
Okay, then what would you say? Like, why? What do you think?
I would curve his grade up. Like, if to be fair, like you would have to have all else being equal. The main primary difference is race. Race is just counted holistically in something. It's not the end all be all. It's just part of a number of considerations, which include grades. I don't agree. So I think Ray even misunderstood this point. I don't agree with discriminating against people based on grades.
Okay, so what would but affirmative action fundamentally takes things like that into account. Like,
I don't think there's anything wrong with taking race into account. Yeah, that's what affirmative.
Well, no, but what do you think the deciding factor was?
I don't know that the deciding factor actually was race.
Well, I mean, I think you could do a priori. We can determine that was most likely the case. I mean, there really isn't any other logical conclusion we could come to.
Which school was this?
I'm not going to say what school it was.
You won't even say which university this was?
No, but it was a top tier university. It was like a 29% acceptance rate.
Harvard, Stanford, Yale,
up there. It wasn't an Ivy League, but it was up there. It was on that same tier.
Okay, yeah, I'm already in a tier. I went to a tier 1 university. I don't know. I would say race is the fundamental deciding factor there. They incorporated a number of different factors.
I'll put it in private chat.
Okay, sure.
I'll also point out that, like,
scared to say that out loud.
Sorry.
Okay, yeah, just one.
I don't like talking about like past stuff in terms of specifics, just safety reasons.
Sure.
But, yeah.
One thing you did remark on is like, why don't we try to just prioritize socioeconomic status and be race neutral and see what happens, right? We've already got studies on what happens. California and Texas have had race neutral admissions for the better part of 20 plus years. And the results were that you had about 25% fewer applicants that were Black and brown, right? You ended up having fewer admissions that were Black and brown. You ended up seeing a marked decrease in the populations that would most benefit from affirmative action, which is in itself an issue because these are the populations that most need it, right? These are the populations that are most that are the least likely to produce the human capital necessary to produce, for example, like entrepreneurs, right? So if you have more applicants, if you have more admissions of different racial backgrounds, if a big problem in the Black community is poverty, one way you can fix that is by producing Black businessmen. We just saw a 25% decrease from race neutral admissions that results in 25% fewer potential Black businessmen, right? Like we're looking at less human capital in Black communities. We've already seen the results of what you want, Politicrat, and it's worse for these people. Like, what would you suggest to remedy that?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I was asking you if that decision ultimately was fair and what you would do in order to make sure that something like that doesn't happen, because it seems like we could only have one thing or the other. And I think the most logical decision would be to do away with affirmative action.
No, the one thing or the other. I don't know what you mean one thing or the other.
What I mean, one thing or the other, it's like either have affirmative action and it benefits some at the disadvantage of others through a systemic or through policy.
That's fine.
Or you don't have those policies in place and ultimately it naturally has to do with ability, yet there still might be some disparities. Yes, I mean, of course, there are still problematic aspects to that. Of course, there will be people who won't be able to succeed even when the system ultimately helps them. But still, morally speaking, two wrongs do not make a right.
No, this is rectifying a wrong, right? That's kind of the issue. Is Black?
Yeah, but then it also it opens a whole new door that leads to other wrongs.
I'm not sure what other wrongs does this lead to?
The discrimination of people who come from backgrounds that otherwise would be privileged, when it should just purely be based on ability. Like, just because somebody is born into a certain background doesn't mean that they should ultimately be discriminated against due to immutable characteristics.
No, I don't agree. Universities serve a very vital public function in producing entrepreneurs and producing academics, like producing researchers, right? And all of this stuff benefits from having a diverse
But what if I'm a better researcher?
Then it would be valuable to have you. Right?
Exactly.
Race is just one consideration. Race is not the end all be all.
Ultimately, you are, though, saying that some people should be replaced by other people because their ancestors did something. And again, like, I'm okay with that.
Yeah. How do you rectify this as an issue then? Because we have like so few black and brown college admissions. We have so few black and brown college graduates, and it's been deliberately engineered that way. How do you repair that? If not through affirmative action, then what's your solution?
I don't. You see, I don't have a. Oh, are you talking to me or are you talking to El Templar?
Either of you. It's an open question.
I don't have a problem with it. So
I don't think Templar is fine with this position. Politicrats. How do you?
I'm going to be completely. I haven't thought of that. I haven't thought of a solution. I could have before this stream.
Should we? Don't you think we should think of a solution before we scrap this system that has helped black and brown people?
So I think that we should scrap the system first and then try to come up with a solution this has to do with the inherent aspect of discrimination. Like there is inherent systemic discrimination with affirmative action policies. That's what I'm saying. Temporarily, as sort of a provisional sort of system, it's better that we have something that is more natural until we can come up with something that a solution that ultimately makes it more
getting rid of
equitable.
Affirmative action is discrimination the other way, right? It's basically saying to black and brown people, your background and your experiences aren't really relevant to your admission into this college, even though they've been relevant for all of human history up to this point, right? Like for the past 4 centuries, we have not ignored race. We've engineered outcomes based on race. Like if you're saying now we can't consider race, it's pretty clear.
Well, how does this engineer out? How does getting rid of discrimination, or how does getting rid of affirmative action, how is that engineering outcomes based on race? Because that's basically what affirmative action is doing, even more so.
Yeah, so it's engineering outcomes based on race by telling people who've been most afflicted based on their race that they can't incorporate their race into their admissions, that their racial background is irrelevant to the admissions process, right? That's how it's engineering an outcome based on race, because we don't all have the same racial background experiences. Black and brown people have a unique racial background experience in this country that has put them at a disadvantage.
I think it has to do with, from a moral perspective, negative discrimination is less problematic than positive discrimination.
Why? I guess like we've structured society so long based on positive discrimination. It seems like this only serves the same end as that positive discrimination before, which is to uphold white supremacy, right? The whole purpose.
So you think getting rid of affirmative action?
White supremacy is such a farce.
That's
an anti-white lie, and you.
Oh my God, poor white people. The whole purpose of this discrimination.
Yes, poor white people. Indeed.
Shut up, lady. You have nothing to contribute.
I'm just tired of this bullshit. Jesus Christ.
Politicrat. Positive discrimination was engineered prior to affirmative action to the benefit of white people. Now, if you're saying, well, now we're just going to allow for negative discrimination, not count race at all, it's again to the benefit of white people, right? It's to the same structure as before, where it disadvantages black and brown people by pretending that suddenly race doesn't impact anything. But we know that's just not the case. Race absolutely does impact things.
Okay, then let me turn this back around on you, because it seems like you've thought about this more than I have in terms of solutions. What would you propose? So something like the anecdotal experience, and of course I don't want to make it about me. That was just I was drawing from personal experience. So
I don't prefer the anecdote in the first place.
So yeah, but somebody who goes through something like that, how would you make it so something like that doesn't happen, but at the same time, discrimination against people of like other racial backgrounds, that doesn't happen either. What would you propose? How would you make that more equitable?
Well, I think
because
I want it to be equitable based on race, because the disadvantages were engineered based on race. But like for I don't know, like your specifically like unfair anecdote, like I don't know that I can fix every individual applicant. Like there's going to be some schools where it's like it might be more valuable to have a lower socioeconomic status, dumber black guy than it would be a rich white guy who's also a good researcher, right? They have because they have other things they can contribute, right? In terms of their experiences they could bring to the table, which could even advantage the white people.
In that, but maybe in other contexts, but not necessarily in an academic context.
Well,
Yeah,
no,
I just don't
even
see
in,
it.
even
I
in an
don't see it.
academic context, right? A lot of these people end up becoming social scientists. It's pretty valuable for social scientists to get valuable perspectives from other people.
Yeah, it's.
Why
I mean,
not?
that
Why not
seems
move
like
the intervention back to further? And this is something I said that while you were away getting water or something. But why not move this intervention, which I understand to be very well intentioned, LSP on your part? But why not move this intervention further back to when they're in like primary school years, like, let's say. I'm not sure. I don't think you will call them primary school, but you know what the first level of school that you attend.
We call it grade school.
Right.
School.
So move it back to that
elementary.
point, because LSP raised a valid point that I think, at least earlier on, where he said that things are segmented in American society on the basis of race and class, but primarily race, he said, and because the district you live in determines your outcomes because of the wealth in that district. I mean, my idea here would be stop funding school districts on the basis of taxation of land in the area, because, of course, property taxation in a poor district is going to deliver extremely poor school funding.
I agree with that.
So stop doing that. Have it all be from the federal level. Federal level essentially parcels out to each school essentially the same program, the same funding allocations. It's assessed every year to find out how students are performing in different areas. More intervention in places where it's not working very well. Essentially federalize the entire thing. Okay, that's the first step. The second step, in terms of people having not enough access to wealth. So again, education is obviously tied again to wealth. So specifically, government intervention to make sure that students all have an equal shot from the very beginning in grade schools right the way through. The other thing you do is the issue of student loans that was covered earlier. Just don't have that anymore, and instead have publicly funded education. That way, when you get to the point where people are entering university, you can then indeed do a purely meritocratic entry into university level education, and you don't have to worry about who is rich, who is poor, who is historically discriminated against, because you've already begun fixing it when they were born. Am I completely insane here, or does that sound like a better solution than waiting until they're already 18 to suddenly intervene?
I'm skeptical of the federal aspect, but other than that, I think that what you are proposing is a better alternative.
I think Asians still dominate in that situation.
I mean, it might happen, but then at least you could say it's meritocratic completely at that point. It would be the most fair possible outcome. No one would be able to say at that point that there was any tilting of the tables there.
I've helped homeschool Asian kids, and I don't want to be racist, but they do tend to learn faster, and they do tend to and I would say it's because the parents are more invested historically.
I think that is part of the.
I've told you about that word.
Major factor.
Say anti-Asian. Don't use the R word. That hurts everybody.
Yeah. I mean,
yes, that is something I agree with you. I think we should, when we're, instead of using a meaningless term that is essentially become meaningless, like racist, we need to use anti-black, anti-Asian words like that. You've convinced me on that particular.
Thank you.
Yeah, maybe I'm not saying it the right way.
Because media and stuff is explicitly anti-Asian, as well as the policies here. And we should speak correctly about.
And this is why I brought Ray on too, because I think she is one of the most qualified to speak on this issue. When it comes to
I do agree that
Asian
it's good to be specific as to which kind of discrimination is taking place. But I mean, I am glad that people generally agree that there should be that's the thing that I find interesting about the panel so far. Like, everyone agrees there should be an intervention then. Generally speaking, am I wrong?
No, I don't think there should be intervention, because I don't like government pretty much at all, especially with the disaster we've seen recently. I'm with Templar on just letting everybody go to their own group and sort things out. I don't like government intervention.
That's the Malcolm X position right there.
No, you see this. No, but this seems to conflict with the direction that you all were going with me just now. Because when I said that you all disagree with LSP on intervening around age 18 to make what's been described here as the affirmative action decisions on the basis of things that have happened over time, I'm saying that, okay, let's say that LSP is correct about all of these disadvantages he's spoken on, but that we don't want to trust Harvard admissions people to make these decisions at the end of the line because they may have their own inbuilt biases, right? Let's just say that we're saying that. Then why would you all then disagree with the idea of taking this meter and dragging it right the way back to the beginning of the person's childhood and intervening there instead? Because then at least you know at that point then, every decision that person has made subsequent to that, if everything is equalized, then they're rising or falling on their own merit at that point. You can't possibly complain.
I will note the complaints that are kind of ironic to me is like you guys are very skeptical of like government doing the intervention here based on race. Government intervening here was telling Harvard they can't take into account race. Government is discriminating based on race now. They basically said you can't.
But that's the Supreme Court.
Race. That's
government. An institution that has been around since
that
we
is the
had
institution
like a small
of government, right? That is the institution of government, right?
We're talking more about large bureaucratic programs. We're not talking about the court system, because I think even people who are for small government agree that the Supreme Court should exist. It's not an
shouldn't exist, but I'm saying the Supreme Court's intervention is government intervention, right? So if we're so skeptical of government intervention,
and that kind of government intervention is fine, because again, it's from a goal. Nobody is arguing, not even the smallest of government people are arguing that
Congress decides based things on like creates laws too, right? Like this illegal angle there too. Why would you be skeptical of Congress?
Because the Supreme Court, there is an explicit process with precedents that they have been essentially going through the same process ever since the government was founded initially as a smaller government, whereas Congress has more freedom to continue legislating bills that will ultimately expand the government, whereas the Supreme Court does not have that power. That is not what it exists for. It exists in its completely own apparatus.
But they just did expand government. They just said government's going to go and tell Harvard what their admissions process has to be. That is an expansion of government.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. Yeah. I mean, again, this is why I have to say the best policy is to just let them discriminate as they please.
Yep.
Found more schools. That's all you gotta do.
Construct additional pylons.
Yeah. Well,
build more ziggurats.
While LSP was away, what I said was like when you do these policies, you are sacrificing someone from a better off background, and their future is now going to be worse off. You're punishing them for something that they didn't do. I don't really like that.
And I have a saying. I have a saying that you guys are welcome to spread yourselves, which is for every diversity hire, there's a diversity fire. Yeah. And you need to think about that when you start thinking about these kind of systems and what people you want to give power over you to make those decisions for you.
And
I mean, it seems as though both of you want to have it both ways. Whereas you want to say that, okay, you want to disagree with LSP because he's attempting to change the way that things are structured through a managed intervention. But then when you're presented with the alternative, which is to essentially take large sums of money which have already been printed and which everyone has admitted to the fact that the Federal Reserve is just printing this money anyway, and allocate it in specific ways at the beginning of the person's life so that every choice they make after that point is entirely meritocratic, then suddenly you're all against that too, because you want to do what Elf Templar is talking about, which is allowing the private companies to actually just do whatever they want, even if that should happen to hurt you. So why are we like, for example, you're essentially arguing that the private company that runs the university should be able to do to Politicrat what they did to Politicrat, to invoke that example again, even though like if you were to go with my suggestion, that would not.
But it was a public university that I ended up that I was referring to.
I think public schools should do merit and private schools should do whatever they want. Like
I agree.
It tends to be fair that way. Again, you're not going to have fairness, but like it tends to be like at least rational. Like a private institution should be able to determine what its student body is going to be based off what it wants, what its ideals are, what it was built for, what its function is. A public school is meant to take everybody's tax dollars and probably should reflect the community it's built in. That seems to me a happy medium. And like ultimately, if you're going to like sacrifice white students because of some perceived historic grievance that they might be immigrants that they even contribute to, it's fucked up. But you're a private institution, you do what you want. Public, no.
This exactly goes back to my position on the last subject was in terms of private business. It's like, yes, I mean, private businesses should have the freedom to the freedom to discriminate. Whereas, for instance, if you're trying to get a federal job or you're trying to get a job just anywhere in the public sector, in that instance, there should be no discrimination allowed. I think there is that is consistent. So,
yeah, I've been in on some of the, because like I was in a PhD in contributing to education, so I've seen these conversations play out. It was in Europe, so it was more so like in their context. But like, again, if you're a private institution and you're beholden to your shareholders and your shareholders decide we want to be more diverse, you should have the right to do that, and decide we want to cater to our native population, you should be able to do that. If you're a public institution that's catering to what your democratically elected officials want, then they have to cater to that. And if a bunch of people elect, like, hey, we're going to be a white community and we want white schools, they should have the right to do that as a Democrat community. But at the same time, if a black student moves in and they kind of have a scholarship or everything, I mean, if it's a public institution, they should be catered to because it's a public.
It's also the difference between, for instance, desegregation versus forced integration. And this
Right.
was like one of the big disagreements, especially in the 1960s, between Malcolm X and MLK.
Yeah,
MLK
was right. Malcolm X is a good guy.
Malcolm X was like, okay, he was like, let's desegregate, and then let's.
Malcolm X sees things more like we do.
out.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, look at the fruits of MLK's labor. It's just a bunch of hate vengeance cycles. Whereas MLK, I'm sorry, but MLK made better people. Not MLK. Malcolm X made better people. The black people from Malcolm X, they have more self-respect. They have more go-get attitude. The people from MLK tend to be just lazy savages.
I mean, he was very pro entrepreneurial.
Yeah, I like Malcolm X a lot more. I think Martin Luther King was a fucking idiot. I
don't hate MLK, but I prefer Malcolm X.
I certainly do. He's a despicable anti-white Marxist.
I have no respect for Martin Luther King. I have total respect for Malcolm X because he was a good person and did good things.
LSP, you were going to say something?
Oh no, never mind. I'm sorry. He said MLK, then he said Malcolm X. So never mind.
I confused it. Sorry.
Okay. So yeah, I think I'm gonna ask. So we're already at the 2:10 mark. There was a recent case that involved unions. I wanted to ask if you guys had any interest of spending just a little bit of time going into that, or.
I have a few thoughts about unions I can give you.
I was going to say, being from New York, you probably definitely have some opinions.
I am pro union. I think unions are a fundamental way in which labor communicates rights to itself. Again, like, unions are built to serve a specific purpose and function. They should serve the purpose that they are functioned for. They are a good thing. At the same time, there are within the United States law, kind of like federal bullshit unions. Like the teachers union does not.
Which has been corrupted.
Yeah. The teachers union doesn't give a shit about teachers. The electrical union gives a shit about electrical workers. Like in New York City, the IBEW builds housings for its union members. It puts money to work and it benefits its members. It is a very good, like, private government, basically. It builds its own schools, it builds its own buildings, it builds its own institutions. It serves its community. The teachers union just extracts wealth and buys politicians. It's fucking disgusting.
Plus it's conflict of interest because it is in the public sector.
I basically, to not waste time, I pretty much echo everything he just said. That's how I feel about unions. They're good and bad. If they work correctly, then that's great. If they're corrupt, then they're just bad.
I'm fine with private sector unions 100%. It's a First Amendment right to unionize. However, I do think there is definitely a conflict. Again, that's why I'm against public sector unions. But either way, when we go on specifically to this court decision, this is the last one we're going to go over. In an 8-1 opinion, that's a change. The justices provided a new definition to the limits of the right to strike under federal labor law. At issue in Glacier Northwest versus International Brotherhood of Team Masters, local union, blah, blah, blah. Whether a union can sue its employees, union under state law for damage employer incurred as a result of the union strike. Yes, of course. Only she dissented. The new one. Remember the one who wrote the really bad.
Did you see the meme about how long her response was versus Thomas, which was like 200 words or something?
Yeah,
that was like a leftist meme joke.
But the workers in this case who drive concrete mixers went on strike. Drivers allowed Glacier to load trucks with concrete. At the appointment hour for the strike, several drivers drove their trucks back to Glacier's headquarters and walked off at the job. The company was unable to deliver the concrete, and some of it hardened, requiring the company to scramble to find a way to safely dump the concrete, destroy it, and cart it away. So at that point, it does have to do also with, I guess, whether they're able to deliver the service, because, of course, in a lot of ways, strikes ultimately end up hurting not just businesses, but also consumers. And I guess that's when you get into the more moral aspects of it too. I know we're not necessarily discussing morality here, but what are your guys' opinion on this on this ruling?
I think I'm gonna be the only one like confused by this. Wasn't this strike announced ahead of time?
Not according to the SCOTUS blog. This
Okay,
this is
so
an
then
opinion
this is just
piece.
vandalism. Like they didn't inform their employers they were going to strike, so they just let the concrete mixer run and then just like fuck it.
Yeah, there should be laws against this.
Yeah, I agree.
Like,
That's
yeah.
just vandalism. I wouldn't defend a union doing that. I would defend a union's right to strike. And you know what? If they're still ordered to work, even when they've already informed their employers they're going to strike, then that's on them. But if they weren't informed, like, holy shit, that's just vandalism.
Yeah.
So what was this? Was this a wildcat strike then, where it was essentially done without warning, without notification?
Yes, that appears so.
I think back in the day, didn't they call that a walkout strike?
What did the court find? What was the court's decision at the end of that?
They found that they ruled against the unions who, or no, I think it was the company ended up suing the union for saying, hey, you can't do this again. Vandalism, unable to deliver to consumers, causes a whole bunch of problems, and the Supreme Court found in favor of the company. And ultimately, the only one who dissented was Jackson Brown, or whatever her name is.
Miss Burn Down Cities, I guess.
And what was her argument in her dissent then?
Hold on, we just had that.
I'm assuming it's going to be below what the others said.
It just says,
just so we know,
she dissented. Hold on, I'll search the. So in her first solo dissent as justice, Jackson faulted the majority for ignoring the fact that the NLRB had undertaken its own investigation of the facts since Glacier filed its tort suit. The agency found that these facts supported the insurance of a complainant alleging that Glacier had filed the tort suit to retaliate, implicit in the NL. Okay. So it seems like she's upset that she saw that the company filing the tort was an act of retaliation, malicious retaliation. And she said that
she would know about malicious retaliation.
It should be given the opportunity to resolve the issues and require the state court to engage in quote unquote jurisdictional hiatus. Jackson admonished the majority for not following precedent.
Is she saying that they were informed then because the NLRB had
she's saying they were she's claiming they were implicitly informed.
What does that mean? What is implicitly informed? How are they
what does that mean?
Informed?
As in, at least from what I understand, the existence or the very, I'm trying to find the best way to word this, but the fact that they can do that should have informed the company that they would do that. Maybe I'm reading this wrong.
That's really weird. That's like saying,
looking at her next paragraph here, I'm seeing that there is something she's trying to say here. I'm just not sure if I'm able to fully understand it. She said, Jackson also disputed majority's characterization of the facts. She wrote, the Teamsters' handling of the concrete was well within the lines drawn by other perishable goods cases. In her most strongly worded passage, Jackson accused the majority of requiring workers to undercut their own power by giving notice of their intent to strike. Workers are not indentured servants, she wrote, bound to continue laboring until any planned work stoppage would be as painless as possible for their master. I mean, I'm saying if here, if that is how that went, then I mean, yeah, that would actually be the broad understanding of how unions work in most places, which is where you're not. I don't think you're sort of bound to make the strike painless, because then otherwise, what's the point of the strike?
Yeah. But yeah, no, but I think it means like in the moment, because they were already in the midst of a specific job.
Yeah.
So they should.
But I mean, should they have completed the job and then halted and then called the strike at a point where the business owners would be like, "Oh, well, you've conveniently completed the job you were currently doing, so now we're no longer in panic mode." You see what I mean? So I mean, as whack as it may sound, maybe Jackson has a point here.
There's some argument in there that's to the union's favor, but yeah, like that seems to be a point taken up separate from the damage.
And also remember, law is downstream from power and culture is downstream from law. So the Black Lives Matter justice we have here, of course, doesn't want it to be financially or legally culpable for workers to commit vandalism, because that's what BLM's all about. And the people in power do what is best for their people and their minions.
I mean, I'm not sure that we can make this connection to BLM on this either. I mean, even this particular phrasing, workers are not indentured servants. I mean, as far as I'm aware, and anyone can correct me if I'm wrong, I didn't think that African peoples in the Americas fell into the indentured servants category anyway. The people who were indentured servants were
they did until 1650.
Irish immigrants, and I don't know, Asian people who migrated in that direction, right? I mean, they would have the sort of front and facing understanding of indentured servitude, where basically you're contracted to do the job and you can't stop until it's reached a point where the people who have employed you are satisfied that they would be least inconvenienced by you quitting. You see what I mean? So she's made an interesting point there.
No. Okay, so I think the issue here, it specifically has to do with the property damage. Like, if that wouldn't result from them stopping mid-job, that would be an issue. But the issue was because the nature of the job required them to finish it or else the property would have been damaged.
It sounds like she might be dividing the property damage from the case itself. I'm not sure.
No,
so
that's what it sounds like to me.
In that case, she might have a point, but it's not relevant to the case itself, right?
Well, I think Ray's point was that strikes.
In terms of the damage,
hold on. Let LSP. Let LSP.
Oh yeah,
talk.
Sorry. Go on.
I think Ray's point was that strikes are supposed to be economically painful. But I might remark there's a pretty substantial difference between economic pain inflicted by a lack of work being produced and economic damage being as a result of deliberate destruction of property, right?
I agree.
In this case, the striking workers understood that by abandoning these concrete trucks, the property would be damaged. And I'm not sure that an implied strike coming is notification of a strike. I don't think I would agree with that characterization. I think if you intend to strike, you have to inform your employer that you intend to strike.
Exactly. That's kind of like if you want to go out and protest, you need to inform the city, hey, we're going to have a protest. You can't just go out.
On this I would meet you all on that one, because I would expect that that there would be an explicit declaration of the beginning of a strike, even if of course you're not obligated to disclose when the strike would end, because that would be silly, of course. But when it begins, should at least be given to them. And so, yeah, it does seem strange to me that this argument involved an implicit notification. Like, I don't like this implicit thing. I kind of like it to be solid. But I mean, I'm assuming we all agree though they shouldn't have to notify when it will end.
Yeah,
no,
I agree with that.
No.
Okay.
It should go on as long as negotiations go on, right?
Okay.
So, hold on. Yeah, so I'd say let's wrap this up within the next 10 minutes. We're going to move on to final thoughts here. Templar had to step away for a second. But
final
just on the overall...
Like outros or just final thoughts on this topic?
Not outros, but just final thoughts on this topic, and then we'll go around and we'll do final thoughts just on the subject of the stream in general, just like wrapping up what you thought. So not outros, but so we'll do rapid one by one. With Templar, we'll save him for last for this specific issue because, of course, he's gone. But yes,
on this
specific topic.
Okay. Yeah. Just making sure. I've said everything I care to say. I think we've hit the major talking points, and it is what it is.
LSP.
Yeah, I don't really disagree with the Supreme Court ruling, so I guess I don't have much to add.
I mean, most of the Supreme Court, agrees with us on this. Ray, because you were the most you were the most iffy on this one.
Yeah, I mean, as it has been presented here, I mean, I'd be open to what Jackson's argument is. It's just that I don't like this implicit thing. I would have preferred if they had explicitly explained what was going to happen before it happened. But again, the way that this story has been reported, I wouldn't say that I'm 100% confident that I understand what is meant by this implicit notification. So I'm still kind of not entirely firm on it. So how can I put this? The way that it's been presented, if it really is as it's described, that they weren't informed, then it means I have to agree with what their ruling was on this one. But if it turns out that they were in fact informed and this quote implicit informing is of the more obvious kind, then maybe my opinion would be different.
Yeah, there seems to be a confusion if implicit inform means just the workers or the business also.
Yeah, because maybe the implicit is that the workers had communicated amongst themselves and to the NLRB that it was going to happen, but hadn't explicitly informed the business, and that they somehow thought the business was supposed to know that. I don't know, and so it's a weird one, because again, it's one of those things also that since I'm not from the US, it's one of those things where maybe implicit for them is one of those things where the company was pretending they didn't know it was going to happen. Who knows? It's one of those things where I'm not certain as to whether I trust the specific way in which that reporting was worded.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's
Me too.
I'm not sure who's confusing what in the courtroom, but yeah, like the workers, if they're gonna plan a strike, they should have the right to do that privately. Business doesn't have a right to know that.
Yeah, and an extreme example of this would be, let's say, an air traffic controller. If they just walk out mid-shift, there's going to be really bad problems of negligence, maybe even deaths.
Well,
and you should have to that's different than the company suffering financial loss due to an immediate lack of labor. Like, that's a different thing.
I think the difference is because this is public sector or this is private sector, whereas the air traffic control
that's public sector sort of major.
So I think that's why I don't think public sector unions should exist. It's like, yeah, sucks, I guess, that they don't have collective or they have fewer collective bargaining rights. I'm sure there's a way to
they come
ensure that they have
rules.
some level of it's like, okay, and it's like if you want collective bargaining, then work in the private sector. No one is stopping you. So I mean, it's like, sorry, that's like it's such a complicated, messy issue on that front that like, I mean, you can't always get what you want. So but either way,
I mean, for something like air traffic controllers, I mean, obviously in the case of that's obviously public sector, and it's obviously a case where critical national infrastructure, they'll have to inform ahead of time sort of and not do any like funny shenanigans. Whereas with perhaps a private business with like, I don't know, trucks being damaged because of concrete, then you can probably come to the conclusion that, okay, we don't know who made a mistake there or who didn't inform who, but it wasn't done in such a way that anyone died from it.
Property was still damaged. But either way, Luth Templar, so final thoughts on this specific issue?
If I'm understanding it correctly, like, yeah, the union does not have a requirement to inform the private company that they're going to strike, but it seems like the property damage is probably a separate issue to that.
Yeah, that's what I'm seeing here too, because I don't think this should be covered under union stuff. If the people are responsible for vandalism, then go after them over that. If the people are responsible for negligence, you can go after them for that. I don't think this should be a union issue. A union law issue, excuse me.
On that note, we've gone over our 4 subjects. Wrapping into the final few minutes, I want to go again one by one, like we typically do at the end of each stream. I guess I part of me wants to say, oh, what we have learned tonight, but I guess that could be part of it. But just overall thoughts, not only on the stream itself, but just your if you were to write an essay on this entire on everything that we went over, what would your final paragraph be? Let's frame it like that. We will go one by one, starting with Yiz.
I don't know if I can meet that requirement.
Well, no, okay. Just final thoughts on the stream itself.
Okay, because it's late and I'm about to pass out. So
yeah. That's why we're wrapping up.
I had a pleasant conversation. I'm glad that we mostly agreed on things. That was cool, and it was a good time. We discussed some serious issues. Didn't have many serious arguments. It was good.
All right, Luth Templar.
I'm glad that the America is sort of trying to question the legitimacy of the Civil Rights Act and actually starting to think more in terms of like how do communities serve their own interests rather than utopian idealism. I hope to see more of that, and I hope to see more communities organize into self-interest groups rather than utopian communities and delusions.
And I hope to see more of you, Elf Templar. LSP?
Yeah, I like. Thanks for inviting me. I like talking about this stuff. It's cool talking to you, Templar. Ray, always a pleasure, ma'am. Yiz, I feel like you had nothing to contribute but scoffing and sarcasm like the entire time. So I'll just put out an open invite to you. If you've got the balls, let's debate reparations with Politicrat moderating. And if you don't, well, then we'll just see you as the craven you are. That said, thanks for having me. Have a good night.
Ray?
Well, I mean, I think it was an okay conversation. There's probably a lot more things to be explored. At some point in time, this could probably happen again. We managed to have the conversation without like physically killing each other. So that was also
It hasn't been the worst. It actually wasn't that
pretty okay. Although a gauntlet has been thrown down. So I suppose that debate will have to happen at some point. Then I guess, because I don't think I've ever seen anyone on this channel turn down debate challenges before. So it's probably going to happen then. So let me know if it does.
Yiz's court.
All right.
No,
so
thank you. I'll pass.
I wouldn't do that.
Let's go ahead and do outros. If you have anything to shill at the last minute, now is your opportunity to do so.
I have.
Yeah, let's just go in order. Let's just go in order again.
No, I have nothing to shill.
No channel. You don't have a channel or anything. You don't have a show.
Not that I'd like to talk about. No, let's just move on.
All right. El Tumbler.
Yeah, I don't really like the whole insulting ending thing. I'm just gonna say I write.
Yeah, I think LSP. I do think that is unnecessary. You do have a history kind of sometimes of.
Wait, me? Are you kidding me? She spent the entire thing degrading me because of my age, insulting my intelligence.
Well, I do think yes, I do think that. Yes, I do think that was also.
I will end by saying.
Hey, I match energy here, dog.
I will end by saying. You're proving that you're operating on a vengeance cycle, and you will never solve inequality by doing that. So I will simply advocate for my Substack, in which I explore alternative views of the world other than utopian delusions.
All right, LSP. Anything you want to show?
Yeah, sure. I mean, one, there's my channel, which I mean, it's A27L. Do history content, politics, the whole shebang. Feel free to check it out. I'll post a link in chat. Would it be cool if I shilled my Patreon and PayPal for personal reasons?
Yeah, just go ahead and post it in the post in the chat.
I had a rough year and I ended up in the hospital this year, and that's
sorry to hear
thousands of dollars of medical bills that I frankly cannot afford. So if you guys like having me on, if you guys like what you hear, or if you don't like and you just want me around to beat up, I don't give a shit. It's all the same to me. Your money is your money. Consider supporting my Patreon or my PayPal. Would very much appreciate it.
All right, Ray Marasami.
Well, I mean, you can always follow me on YouTube if you want, although I haven't actually done anything on YouTube in quite a while, but, you know, sort of like watch that space. Maybe something will happen there in the future again when I sort of, I don't know, get the inspiration. You can also follow me on Twitter, Ray Murasame, obviously, all one word, and you'll find my takes there. Occasionally they're good, sometimes they're bad. Let me know.
Well, at least you can admit that, Ray. Well, anyway, thank you everybody for tuning in, and thank you everybody who came on. I know it got a little heated there at some points, but thank you for being, especially Yiz and LSP, for being good sports about it. I'm not going to say, I mean, if something tells me I probably won't have you guys on at the same time again, but that is perfectly fine.
Oh, I'm always down to be on with Yiz. Anytime, Yiz, you want to have a real conversation and not just please let me know. I would love to have a conversation.
I wouldn't want to stream with someone in vengeance like that. That's just
that's childish, and I don't want any part of it. You should trust your gut, Politicrat. You probably shouldn't have us on together.
We can't all be that.
But either way, on that note, so want a reminder, I have just finally started a subscribe star. Need to make some pocket cash. Something tells me this YouTube partnership I'm about to start up probably won't make me a whole lot of money.
Or last.
or last. No, but yeah, no, so take a look there. I've shared it on Twitter. If you want to go at least take a look, contribute a dollar or two, whatever, fine by me. Or if you don't, that's fine too. I'm not going to be the world's famous settler's lament here and insist that people give me shekels. But yeah, Friday night, we're going to be having a more lighthearted stream. It's going to be something, it's definitely going to be less contentious on this, but it's just going to be like, what is woke? Basically, it's about time we've had one of those. LSP is going to be coming back on for that. I don't think any of you guys are going to be on for that one. But yeah, anyway, thank you one last time for everybody who tuned in to watch. Of course, to my panelists, please be sure to like, subscribe, hit the bell, and again, take a look at the subscribe star. And I hope everybody has a pleasant evening.